Chapter 78. At the port of Magnolia, a ship was anchored there. The captain was letting the workers unload the cargo from the ship while glancing to the side from time to time, as if waiting for something. In the captain's line of sight, the magic shooters of fairy tale were gathered here. Their gazes were focused on Noah, and they did not speak for a long time. Noah was the same. His gaze swept over his companions again and again until the captain of the ship not far away cast an urging gaze at him. He took a deep breath and nodded to everyone. "Everyone, let's part here. Brother Noah." Lise Anna was the first to call out to Noah, her face full of reluctance. "Remember to take good care of yourself." "Don't worry." Noah stepped forward and patted Lisanna's little head. "This is not the first time I've left fairy tale for training. You don't have to worry too much." "That's true," Elisha said as if she was joking. "With Noah's strength, even if he encounters a shipwreck, he will be able to survive. We don't have to worry about him at all." "Well, although I'm not very familiar with Celestial Wolf Island, since the first president is there, even a ghost can take care of Noah, right?" Gray was dressed neatly, which was rare for him. He smiled at Noah. "Don't let the people who have passed away worry about you. Let's fight again next time." Naz clenched his fists and grinned. "Next time, I will definitely not lose again." "Love," Harpy called out energetically. Then he reluctantly took out a fish from his backpack. He was drooling while holding back his tears. With trembling cat paws, he handed the fish to Noah. "I'll give you my most precious treasure." "Boo-hoo-hoo." "I'll accept your kindness," Noah said, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "Since it's so precious, keep it well. Don't waste it." Like acting in a play, Harpy rapidly took back the fish. His funny performance dispersed a lot of the sadness before the departure, causing many people to reveal smiles. Bon voyage. Karna, Lebi, and the others only said this one sentence and didn't say anything else. Everything was understood without words. Noah nodded in response. Then he paused for a moment and turned to look at Lisanna's side. There, Mira was still wearing her revealing and sexy clothes. Her white ponytail was casually hanging behind her back. She crossed her arms and didn't say a single word. Seeing that Noah was looking at him, Mira dodged his gaze for a moment. Then he snorted and turned his head away, looking like he had no intention of saying anything. Seeing this, Noah shrugged and said mockingly, "I hope you'll become gentler when I come back. Do you want to fight?" Mira blushed and glared at Noah. Her face was full of murderous intent, but the words that came out of her mouth were like that. "Will you come back if I become gentler?" Noah raised his eyebrows. After seriously considering it for a while, he said with a bit of amusement, "That's not impossible. When you become gentler, it'll be about time for me to come back." Myra's expression froze and she fell silent. Nobody saw that Myra's beautiful eyes flashed with undetectable thought as she lowered her head. She muttered softly in a voice that only she could hear, "I'll come back if I become gentler." "Elfman." Noah raised his head and looked at Elfman, who was taller than him. "I hope that when I come back, you can become a little more manly and not be bullied by Mira. You have to learn how to protect your family, understand?" "Protect my family?" Elfman was stunned at first, then looked at Mira and Lisanna with a look of determination in his eyes. "I want to become a man. Protect my family. That's the way." Noah patted Elfman's shoulder and finally looked at Makarov. "Be careful." That simple and comprehensive sentence expressed all the emotions in Makarov's heart. "I know." Noah took a step back and glanced at all of his fairy tale companions again. "Then, everyone, I'll take my leave first. See you in the near future." After saying that, Noah didn't hesitate any longer. He directly boarded the ship that had finished moving the goods while the captain's expression softened. "Goodbye. Goodbye, Noah. Brother Noah. Come back soon. Train hard. Don't let the first generation look down on you. We're looking forward to the 3 major spells of fairy tale. Don't let us down." At the port, below the ship, the members of Fairy Tale waved at Noah one after another, causing a warm feeling to surge in Noah's heart as he turned his back. Under such circumstances, The ship slowly set sail and sailed towards the boundless ocean. On the deck, Noah, whose back was facing the port, only had one thought left in his mind. He hoped that he would not cry when he left. Noah. Just as Noah was thinking this, a loud call came from the port that was already very far away. Noah could not help but turn around and look in the direction of the port. In the next moment, Noah's body trembled and a dazed expression appeared in his eyes for the first time. In an extremely orderly movement, the members of Fairy Tale standing at the port of Magnolia, led by Makarov, straightened one of their hands, stretched out their thumb and index finger, and pointed to the sky with an inverted 7 sign. That was a gesture that only those who were familiar with the fairy's tale or those who were familiar with the fairy's tale would know. This was the meaning behind the gesture that was unique to the fairy tale. Noah's hand was already tightly grasping the edge of the ship. His body leaned forward as if to see his family. His hand that was holding the edge of the ship was trembling and his expression was violently moved. All the emotions in his heart finally could not be controlled and all gushed out. Noah could only close his eyes and try his best to adjust his emotions. One of his hands was raised high above his head and made the same gesture as the members of Fairy Tale, pointing to the sky. At this moment, Noah's heart was incomparably convinced of a fact. Only Fairy's Tale was his home. He would definitely come back again. Heavenly Wolf Island. Carrying the cloth bag with his luggage, Noah disembarked from the ship and once again boarded the sacred land of Fairy Tale. After 2 days, Noah once again came to Heavenly Wolf Island. He could clearly feel that Heavenly Wolf Island was slightly different from the first time he came here. This slight difference was that the magic that filled the ground of Heavenly Wolf Island was no longer chaotic like last time. Instead, it flowed in an orderly manner and gathered in the direction of the Heavenly Wolf Tree. Looking at the huge Heavenly Wolf Tree not far away, Noah closed his eyes and covered his chest with his hand. Dong dong! Almost at the same time, Noah's heart strangely stirred. The calling that he could always feel also became stronger. Noah did not hesitate. As if he wanted to grasp this feeling, Noah's chest tightened. Wang! Without warning, the space around Noah began to distort, enveloping Noah's body and swallowing Noah's figure. Then, Noah disappeared from where he stood. Chapter 79. Even with his eyes closed, Noah could clearly feel it. In front of his eyes, there was a white that was enough to penetrate his eyelids and enter his vision. His brain seemed to have entered a state of confusion and could not operate in time. His body seemed to have entered the world of water, and there was no sense of direction. Noah could only use his consciousness to barely understand that he seemed to be in a state of weightlessness. His body was spinning and floating back and forth uncontrollably, as if he was floating up and down with the waves. It was very strange. Noah himself did not know how long this feeling lasted. Perhaps his confused brain was no longer able to distinguish the concept of time, and let Noah maintain this state until he grew old, or until he died. That might be the case. Therefore, when the familiar feeling of being on the ground was transmitted to Noah's confused brain through his feet, it made Noah's confused brain shake. When he gradually came to his senses, Noah actually had a faint sense of happiness and satisfaction to be able to be on the ground. Immediately, Noah opened his eyes. The first thing that entered Noah's eyes was a white that was enough to hurt people's eyes. Noah could not help but raise a hand in front of him, squinting his eyes slightly. After adapting to the strong white light, he raised his head and looked ahead. Unfortunately, there was nothing in front of Noah. There were no objects. There was no environment. There was no sky. There was no earth. Even the boundary line did not enter Noah's vision. This was a world with nothing. Except for a white that was enough to hurt people's eyes, there was nothing here. Noah seemed to be floating in the air, but he felt as though he was standing on solid ground. It was as though he was standing on an invisible ground. Everything in his field of vision was white. Except for the white, there was nothing. However, it was such an empty world that made Noah's body tremble, as if he had fallen into soft cotton. It was like a baby returning to his mother's body, and he felt very comfortable. This feeling made Noah's eyes widen. Because, This was a feeling that only appeared when he entered the white dream in the past. At that moment, Noah's remaining blurred consciousness was completely awakened, allowing Noah to realize what was going on. He wasn't really in a dream. This place was still the place that Noah had seen in his dreams more than once. However, this time, this place gave Noah a sense of reality, without the illusory feeling of a dream. Noah could understand what was happening in an instant. The fact that the white dream was real. Now, Noah finally came to the dream that could be said to have accompanied him for his whole life. Since this is the case, Noah slightly clenched his fists and raised his head to look at the direction where the sky should have been. Thus, Noah saw feathers falling to the ground to be floating in the bubble, the feathers that fell from the sky, enveloped by a white halo and suspended in a bubble, the feathers that fell from the sky. Ding 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 ding. It was as if they were welcoming Noah. Pieces of feathers emitted dazzling halos as they came to Noah's side. Like little birds, they cheerfully circled Noah and began to circle around him. Bursts of intense light surged from the feathers. Bathed in the light, Noah felt an emotion called joy. The scene was exactly the same as when Noah obtained the feather on Sirius Island. The difference was that the feathers that were circling around him were not only much brighter than the feathers that Noah received, but the emotions contained within them were also much more intense. In addition, the feathers in front of him were complete. The feathers that Noah received, however, were incomplete. Wait. Noah suddenly woke up. Incomplete? If he didn't remember incorrectly, Noah remembered that in the white dream, other than these perfect feathers, there were also many incomplete feathers. It was unknown whether or not they knew what Noah was thinking, but the feathers that were circling around Noah suddenly dispersed. Following which, in the vast expanse of white sky, more and more feathers fell from the sky. They were incomplete and dull. Compared to the feathers from before, they looked as if they had lost their lives. This incomplete and dim feather also circled around Noah's body. As it spun, it emitted an extremely dim radiance compared to the previous feather. From these lights, Noah could only feel one emotion: sorrow. It was like a child who was crying to his family after being hurt. Noah couldn't help but reach out his hand and pick up one of the incomplete feathers. His eyes slightly shook, and he couldn't help but say this: "How can I help you?" Almost at the same time Noah's voice fell, Noah's body blossomed with the same light. A similarly incomplete feather floated out from his body and arrived in front of Noah. The incomplete feathers that were circling around Noah's body all trembled as if they were excited. Then, one by one, they began to circle around the feather that flew out from Noah's body. Not long after, one of the feathers seemed to tremble in joy. Together with the other feather that was also trembling, they slowly approached each other. Ding! In the next second, the two equally damaged pieces of the feather actually perfectly fit together. With a strange sound, they were restored to their perfect state. The recovered feathers blossomed with a strong light that absolutely couldn't be compared to before. They released emotions called excitement, gratitude, ecstasy, and other emotions to Noah. They flew to Noah's cheeks in an extremely human-like manner and rubbed against Noah's cheeks. Inconceivably, Noah's heart was filled with gratification and joy. It was as if he had a heart-to-heart with the feathers. He stroked the feather that was rubbing against his face and said as if he understood, "I understand. As long as I can find your incomplete parts, you can return to your original state, right?" Wang wang wang. Around them, the incomplete feathers began to tremble one by one, echoing Noah's words. But Noah furrowed his brows. "Where should I go to find your missing parts?" The feather that was rubbing against Noah's cheeks suddenly flew in front of Noah and immediately hit Noah's head. In the next moment, from the feather, fragments of memories flowed into Noah's mind, allowing Noah to obtain a fact that almost made him cry out involuntarily. "You are all worlds?" These complete feathers, before his eyes, were all complete worlds. Except for the world where the fairy's tale was, the rest were all worlds. In other words, the world of the fairy's tale that Noah was originally in was within these feathers in front of him. And now, Noah had already left the world of the fairy's tale and arrived at another strange place. Between worlds. It was a special space where all the worlds were. As for those incomplete feathers, they were each a fragmented world. The other parts of them were lost in those complete worlds. If Noah wanted these feathers to return to their original state, then he would have to enter each and every world and find the remaining parts of the incomplete worlds. He would have to go and save each and every world? Noah's head was a little dizzy. However, the sadness that continued to be released from the surrounding feathers touched Noah's heart, and his expression became gloomy. Finally, Noah let out a deep sigh. The other worlds? Chapter 80. The sky was gray. The ground was red. The forest was decaying. The buildings were decaying. The wind carried a variety of pungent smells. The air was filled with an atmosphere that made one's heart palpitate. Vaguely, a roar that sounded like the roar of a tiger or the howl of a wolf reverberated in the surroundings, reverberating in every corner that could be touched. It gave people a feeling that they were not willing to have in their entire lives. Despair. Looking around at this world that seemed to have completely fallen into hell, Noah, who was standing in the middle of the ground that seemed to be dyed red with blood, couldn't help but deeply frown. What is going on with this world? With just a glance, Noah could recognize that this was a completely different world from the one he was in before. There would be no fairy tale here. There would be no magnolia. There would be no companions that Noah was familiar with. There would also be no place where Noah was supposed to stay. For Noah, this world was completely unfamiliar. Of course, when Noah decided to enter other worlds and help those incomplete feathers to restore their original state, he had already mentally prepared himself. Therefore, even if he came to a completely unfamiliar world, Noah would not be at a loss, nor would he panic. However, at this moment, Noah was truly confused. Since he was entering another world, Noah did not have the extravagant hope that the world he went to was the same as the world he was originally in. However, what was going on with this world that was filled with despair? Could it be that I didn't enter a complete world, but an incomplete world? But Noah had indeed touched a complete feather, so he should have come to a complete world. Moreover, from the feathers that represented each world, Noah also obtained some relevant memory fragments. Therefore, Noah knew that an incomplete world was a world that had been destroyed to a certain extent. Not to mention not being able to enter, even if they could, they would instantly lose their lives due to various circumstances. For example, in a broken world, some had no air, some had no water, some had no food, and some had no living creatures. Unless they could be repaired, it would be a real hell. It was because of this that Noah couldn't help but think that the world in front of him wasn't complete. After all, the atmosphere of despair was too strong, wasn't it? In addition, Noah was also very concerned about one thing. Noah raised his eyes and looked in a certain direction. He tightened the long sack on his shoulder. He saw that somewhere far away from Noah, there was a place that looked like a city. Why did he say that it was similar? That was because a normal city would definitely not be like the city that Noah saw, surrounded by huge black stone monuments that reached into the clouds and were much taller than normal mountains. That was a city that was surrounded by huge black stone monuments that reached into the clouds. Staring at the city that was surrounded by huge black stone monuments, Noah sighed after a while. Looks like I've come to a very amazing world. After saying that, Noah patted his cheeks and pulled himself together. No matter what, there is a place where humans gather. I will definitely be able to obtain some information. Let's first understand what kind of world I've come to. There was no way for a world to dry up a world. Therefore, even if a part of the fragments of an incomplete world were in a different world, the world itself had no way to take them out and restore the incomplete world to its original state. Otherwise, there would be no need for Noah to go through so much trouble to go to another world to collect the fragments of a world. What kind of form would the fragments of a world exist in? Noah also didn't know clearly. Some of them would be scattered in a certain place. Some of them would be hidden in a certain object. Some of them would need to be found personally. Some of them would need to meet certain conditions to appear on their own. All in all, Noah wanted to find the fragments of a world. If he was lucky, he would be able to find them in 1 or 2 days. But if he was unlucky, he might not be able to find them in 10 or 20 years. What Noah could do was to obtain all the useful information. As long as he obtained information related to the fragments of a world, Noah would be able to receive hints from the current world and obtain traces of the fragments of a world. For example, last time, after Noah received information about the celestial Wolf Island, he received a hint about that world and entered the dreamland, where he truly saw the location of the world fragment. And before obtaining a certain amount of information, even Noah's world would not know the location of the fragments of a world. In other words, Noah was like a detector for the fragments of a world. After entering the world of the fragments of a world, as long as he obtained a certain amount of information, the current world would be able to use Noah as a detector to infer the location of the fragments of a world and give hints to Noah. In this way, Noah's existence was like, born in order to find the fragments of a world. Noah's eyes flashed with a complicated expression as he sighed again and again. In the end, after leaving Fairy's Tale, the secret of my existence can only be obtained from such a depressing guess? It was just that Noah unexpectedly couldn't hate this task. There was no other way. Who told those feathers to be like children, pure and innocent, making it impossible for Noah to ignore them? So cheer up. Unfortunately, there was someone who wanted to make things difficult for Noah. Following such a sharp sound, the ground where Noah was suddenly trembled. Noah's expression turned cold. Without hesitation, he jumped up and with an astonishing leap, he jumped more than 20 meters into the air. Pang! Suddenly, the ground where Noah was originally at was broken by a huge black shadow. Dirt and stones flew in all directions, and smoke and dust filled the air. Noah, who had jumped into the air, looked below him, and his pupils fiercely shrank. Gee! A 4 to 5 meter tall monster without fur, with veins popping out like water pipes, a body like a snake, and a head like a man-eating flower, drilled out from the ground. At the same time, it let out a sharp cry, and its mouth full of sharp teeth fiercely bit down, swallowing a lot of dirt. That was the dirt that Noah was originally at. If Noah did not jump up in time, then right now he would be like the dirt, trapped by the disgusting monster's mouth full of unknown liquid, and enter the monster's stomach. Ah! Noah let out a laugh that sounded like anger. You're quite capable. After saying that, Noah directly used the air as a springboard. He turned his body, head down and feet up, and the soles of his feet fiercely stepped on the ground, causing the air to vibrate violently. At the same time, his body was like a bullet, turning into a shadow and shooting down. Shoo! Amidst the sharp air-breaking noise, Noah, who was descending from the sky, spun around again. This time, he swung his leg out with all his might. Together with the explosive descent of his body, he landed a heavy kick on the disgusting head of the monster that looked like a man-eating flower. Before it could even make a sound, the 4 to 5 meter tall monster with a snake's body and a man-eating flower's head was directly kicked by Noah and exploded. Pa pa pa! The disgusting flesh with black blood scattered around, fell on the ground around, and after a few squirms, it stopped moving. This is not a demon, right? Noah, who landed on the ground, looked at the scattered flesh around, and smelled a kind of unpleasant stench in the air. He covered his nose, turned his head, and looked at the city surrounded by huge black stone tablets. My guess was right. We've really come to an incredible world. Chapter 81. Gazes from all directions were focused on Noah, making Noah, who was carrying a cloth bag, frown for a long time. Looking up and looking around, he saw that people who seemed to be residents of this city were passing by Noah. Most of them cast a scrutinizing look at Noah, and some even secretly talked about him, which made Noah somewhat unhappy. Noah, who just came to this world, couldn't have done anything that could attract people's attention. Therefore, the surrounding people were more or less pointing at Noah. There should be another reason. Noah just came to this world, and he didn't know much about this world. To avoid unnecessary disputes, it was better to avoid doing anything strange. Because of this, Although Noah was very curious about the surrounding buildings on the surface, he acted as if nothing had happened. About 30 minutes ago, Noah entered this city. As long as you raised your eyes and looked into the distance, no matter who it was, you could see the huge steels in any corner of this city. Relying on his extraordinary perception, Noah could feel that those huge black steels were faintly exuding some kind of strange fluctuation. It was these fluctuations that made the monsters outside, who wanted to get close to this city, as if they didn't dare to take a step forward. They had been wandering a certain distance away from this city. And this also allowed Noah to more or less get some information. Outside this city, there were many monsters like the monsters that attacked Noah. This kind of monster, but more bloodthirsty than ordinary monsters, seemed to bring a great threat to this city and even the humans in this world. Moreover, it was a life-threatening threat. Therefore, humans seemed to be hiding in this city surrounded by steels that could emit obscure fluctuations to achieve the effect of driving away those monsters. This phenomenon, whether it was everywhere in this world or only in this area, Noah still didn't know. To understand the situation, first of all, Noah had to find a place where he could collect information. However, Noah encountered a problem that was neither too big nor too small. Generally speaking, the best way to collect information at such a time was to go to a bar, hotel, restaurant, and so on. As long as one waited patiently, there would always be people who would talk about various topics during their idle chat, which could bring Noah a lot of information. However, Noah found that it was very difficult to find these places here. The reason was very simple. Sigh. Noah looked at the surrounding buildings and sighed as if he was exhausted. Where in the world is like a bar? That's right. Noah couldn't tell from the surrounding buildings where a bar or something like that was located. The buildings in this world seemed to be different from the buildings in Noah's original world to a certain extent. The surrounding buildings were made of stone bricks and glass, at least 10 to 20 meters in height. There were also buildings of ordinary height. However, these places were basically the same size and shape. It was either difficult to distinguish from the outside, or the plaque hanging above was written in words that Noah didn't recognize, making it impossible for Noah to find. This wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that on some of the roads, there were some strange vehicles made of steel, with tires under them, going back and forth at different speeds. There were also some pillars on the road that were similar to magic lamps that changed colors from time to time. Only when a certain color was reached would the vehicles stop, allowing people to walk on the road and go to the other side. These rules, for a newcomer like Noah, although it wasn't difficult to determine what kind of actions to take under different circumstances, but when he thought of the various rules in this city that only he didn't know about, Noah felt all kinds of distress. It was also because of this that Noah's actions were quite restrained. Only when the people around him were doing the same thing, Noah would do it. Otherwise, Noah had to carefully control his actions to avoid causing trouble. Fortunately, not long after, Noah's eyes began to light up, and the corner of his mouth also curved up. In the place where Noah's line of sight was, in the middle of a row of buildings, there was a building that seemed to be a shop. There were rows of bookshelves in the shop, and the bookshelves were lined with old and new books. Books? Wasn't that a carrier that recorded all kinds of information? For Noah, this was a tool that could save his life. Immediately, Noah hurriedly walked to the bookstore. However, 5 minutes later, Noah came out of the bookstore gloomily. The owner in charge of selling books was an amiable old man. However, no matter how amiable he was, it was too much of a headache for Noah. There were 3 reasons. 1. Noah didn't know what language the other party spoke. 2. Noah didn't know any of the words on the books. 3. The currency Noah carried with him was not the same as the currency of this world. So, Noah simply hit a wall. Sigh. Noah realized that he had been sighing since he came to this world. I have to think of a way. In fact, Noah had some extraordinary understanding and memory. Otherwise, Noah couldn't have learned the language of the original world with just a few books without anyone's guidance, and reached the level of communicating with others. As long as certain conditions were met, Noah could learn a certain level of language expression. However, there had to be someone to communicate with Noah first, and with Noah's sensing ability, Carefully observe and analyze what the other party meant when they expressed a certain language. Only then could he slowly learn the language. Just now, with this idea in mind, Noah tried to communicate with the owner of the bookstore so that he could at least learn how to communicate and then learn the language. However, 5 minutes later, because Noah didn't buy anything and kept speaking in a language that he didn't understand, the boss asked Noah to come out with a vexed expression. Although these 5 minutes allowed Noah to learn a certain level of answering, such as yes, yes, no, hello, sorry, and other simple words, in the end he still couldn't fully communicate with others. There's no other way. Noah rubbed his eyebrows. Although doing this will definitely be annoying and eye-catching, it's the only way now. Leaving this sentence, Noah began to work hard. The content of the work was simple. He kept looking for passers-by to talk. Not long after, on the street where Noah was, many passers-by were forcibly pulled by Noah to have all kinds of unrelated conversations. Because of this, Noah also received all kinds of treatment. Some warm-hearted people, after communicating with Noah for a period of time, were completely scared by Noah's pestering and ran away with their tails between their legs. Some cold people were annoyed by Noah and raised their fists wanting to teach Noah a lesson. In the end, these people were all thrown into small alleys by Noah and also ran away with their tails between their legs. Some puzzled people had been playing a game of communication with Noah. Some people who were in a hurry, after being forcibly pulled by Noah, flew into a rage, and when there was no other way, they ran away like they were running away. In the end, Noah was brought to a room by a kind passerby. The people inside were all wearing strict uniforms, with hats on their heads, black short sticks on their waists, and silver handcuffs. Their faces were somewhat fiendish. About 2 to 3 days later, Noah came out of the room with satisfaction, leaving behind a group of people who had been burned to death lying on the ground, unable to get up again. Later, Noah found out. This place was called the police station. Those fiendish people who were pestered by Noah to the point of vomiting blood were called the police. Chapter 82. Walking on the road, Noah held a book in his hand, flipping through it while walking forward aimlessly. This book was taken by Noah from one of the office desks when he left the place called the police station. The title of the book was Protozoan War. During the 2 to 3 days in the police station, every day, Noah would be challenging the police's bottom line by pestering them and communicating with them one by one. In the end, although all the police in the police station respected Noah like a tiger and wanted to drive him away, Noah still successfully learned to communicate with them to a certain extent. If there weren't any problems, Noah would be able to carry out normal daily life communication smoothly. As for the language, Noah wanted to more or less master it through the book in his hand. Otherwise, Noah would not be able to smoothly obtain a lot of information recorded in the book, and that would be a bit of a problem. Of course, during the 2 to 3 days in the police station, Noah not only obtained a certain degree of communication ability, but also some information about this world. It was the same feeling Noah had when he first came to this world. This world, basically, could be said to be a world full of despair. About 9 years ago, this world was still a peaceful world with a population of more than 8 billion people. However, on a certain day 9 years ago, a kind of monster appeared in this world without warning, and with a terrifying infection ability, it gained an astonishing number of people and attacked the human world on a large scale. The monsters were collectively known as protozoan. They were creatures that were born after being infected with a terrifying virus that had high infectivity through blood and could rewrite the DNA of living creatures. The virus was called protozoan virus. Creatures infected with the protozoan virus, whether human or animal, would all be transformed into protozoan by the virus at an astonishing speed, becoming complete monsters. These monsters not only had terrifying and ferocious power, but they could also infect other creatures with the protozoan virus by injecting body fluids into them, turning the infected creatures into protozoan. They also had a certain degree of regeneration ability. Human weapons could not easily kill these monsters. Under such circumstances, a terrifying number of protozoa launched a large-scale attack on the human world 9 years ago, starting a world war. In the end, humans were defeated. The population of around 8 billion dropped sharply. Only about a tenth of them remained. In the past, the humans who had once ruled over the entire world had also been snatched away by the protogut animals. The remaining 10% of the human population was hiding in the remaining areas. Under the almost hopeless disparity, the protogut animals and the protogut animals engaged in a long tug-of-war for 9 years. And what protected the last areas of human survival and prevented humans from being completely wiped out were those huge black stone tablets that stood around the city. The monolith was a gigantic metallic monolith made of pitch-black metal. The monolith was able to emit a special, weak magnetic field. It possessed the ability to weaken the virus of the protozoa, causing the protozoa to lose their ability to regenerate and causing the protozoa to instinctively stay away from them. It was because of the existence of the monolith that could cause the protozoa to lose their ability to regenerate that humans had the possibility of fighting the protozoa. The monolith, which was made of a large amount of monolith, was erected around the last remaining land of humans, using the magnetic field released by the monolith to isolate the protozoa, allowing humans to survive. But even so, humans could only hide in the places where the monolith existed to prolong their last breaths. Until now, they still dreamed of being able to reclaim their lost land in the future, but they could not do anything to the protogut animals, which had an astonishing number and power. This world was just so despairing. And the city Noah was in was called the Tokyo area. It was one of the 5 areas that was split into 5 after a country called Japan was invaded by the protogut animals. Noah's luck was really not bad. If it was not because he was around the Tokyo area when he descended into this world, Noah would have been besieged by the army of protogut animals that could only be described as terrifying. Noah did not know what level of power these monsters called protogut animals had. However, after 2 to 3 days of hard work, Noah also found out that creatures infected by the protogut animal virus would mutate in a short period of time and mix the infected DNA with the DNA of other animals, turning into terrifying and ferocious monsters, known as protogut animals. And the more DNA of different species mixed with the protogut animals, the stronger and harder their strength and outer skin would be. Therefore, basically, protogut animals were divided into levels I to 4 according to the strength of the protogut animals. Generally, protogut animals that were only infected with the DNA of one species and had the ability to possess the DNA of one species were the weakest, stage I. Those that were infected with 2 or more protogut animals and had the ability to possess the DNA of 2 or 3 species would evolve to stage 2. Protogut animals in stage 3 and stage 4 generally had the DNA of multiple species and also had all the advantages and abilities of these species, which was very terrifying. When he first arrived in this world, he was kicked to the point of exploding by Noah's crisp kick, causing him to be unable to even regenerate. The stage of the protozoan should be stage 2, a protozoan with the DNA of more than 2 species. Noah had the power to destroy stage 2 in one hit, but he did not know how strong stage 3 and stage 4 were. When he thought of this, Noah could not help but mutter, "This world doesn't let people have a good life at all, it's too boring." At this time, a commotion sounded in front of Noah, attracting the attention of Noah, who was immersed in the book and trying to decipher the meaning of those words. Noah raised his head and looked to the front. At the next moment, a young girl, who was not even 10 years old and dressed in tattered clothes and had a face full of soot, ran over in a panic. She pushed through the crowd and ran as if she was running for her life. Behind the little girl, a group of people, rather than saying that they were angry, were chasing in this direction with murderous intent. Obviously, they were chasing the little girl in front of them. Seeing this, Noah frowned. When the surrounding people saw the situation, they were curious and nosy and wanted to get closer. However, when the little girl's eyes were exposed to the surrounding people's eyes, the surrounding people immediately stopped in their tracks. The look in their eyes instantly dropped to the freezing point. Disgust and even hatred appeared on their faces from the bottom of their hearts. Without saying anything, they directly left. Noah saw it too. The little girl's eyes, which caused this phenomenon, were crimson like blood. This made Noah unable to react in time for a moment, and he came face to face with the little girl who was running for her life. The little girl seemed to only realize that there were people in front of her until now. She quickly stopped, and the panic on her face became more and more intense. Even, faintly, Noah could see a trace of despair in the other party's crimson eyes. Finally, a group of middle-aged and young people surrounded the little girl with murderous intent. They mercilessly reached out to the little girl and tightly grabbed her. "Caught you, hateful monster! How dare you come here? See how I deal with you!" A frightened expression appeared on the little girl's dirty face, and she began to scream. "Let me go!" After the voice fell, a scene that made Noah surprised happened. The little girl only struggled for a moment, and those middle-aged and young people who were holding her tightly, whether in terms of size or strength, obviously could not lose to a little girl who was less than 10 years old, flew out one after another as if they were hit by a huge heavy object, and fell to the ground. The strength of this little girl who was less than 10 years old was actually so great that she could break free from nearly 10 adults. It seemed that there were many things in this world that Noah did not know. Chapter 83. Because of the struggle of the little girl with crimson eyes, the people who fell to the ground were all dizzy and couldn't get up in a short time. Seeing this situation, the little girl didn't react, but the people around her actually showed anger. "Sure enough, she's a monster. She's a pest that only hurts humans. Kill her." The people who had turned a blind eye to everything just a moment ago now surrounded the panic-stricken little girl with a face full of fear in the middle. Witnessing all this, the thoughts in Noah's mind could be summed up in 3 simple words. Why is this little girl called a monster? Why are the people around her not only watching her die, but also planning to hit her when she's down? Why are the little girl's eyes crimson? Why is it that a group of Tokyo residents who looked very normal just now, at this time, can easily say, "Kill her," to a little girl less than 10 years old? I don't understand. Noah really doesn't understand. However, Noah doesn't understand, it doesn't mean that he will stand by and do nothing. Without the slightest hesitation, Noah went straight forward. Under everyone's stunned gaze and the little girl with crimson eyes hiding in panic, he grabbed the little girl's hand and then walked out of the crowd. After reacting, including those who chased the little girl from the ground, everyone blocked Noah's way and stared at Noah with sinister eyes. "Do you want to go? Do you want to protect that monster? Be careful that she will turn into an animal at any time and eat you, stinky brat." The people who blocked Noah's way all shouted, and some even did not hesitate to speak ill of Noah, causing more and more people to watch, and more people to cast a terrifying look at Noah with a face full of disgust and hatred. On the contrary, the little girl whose hand was held by Noah seemed to be unable to believe that Noah would stand up for her. She was stunned and even forgot to struggle. Seeing that there were more and more people around him, and the number of comments that were filled with vulgarities and even vulgarities, Noah could not help but feel a tinge of anger rising in his heart. He swung his hand that was carrying the cloth bag on his shoulder and grabbed the cloth bag in his hand. Seeing this, the surrounding voices disappeared in an instant. The expressions of the people who were angry and hateful just now froze, looked at each other and spat out saliva. He's actually a police officer. No wonder he went to protect such a monster. For them, these monsters are rare tools to be used, right? What bad luck. The people who were saying these words no longer looked at Noah. Instead, they glanced at the little girl with crimson eyes with unwillingness. They began to discuss in groups of 2s and 3s while dispersing. Seeing this, Noah was slightly startled, and a thoughtful look flashed across his eyes. "Police officer." It was another unknown word. Noah looked at the monolith in the distance and was somewhat anxious. Without a certain degree of understanding of this world, his actions were bound to be limited. He had to hurry up and obtain the necessary information to understand this world. 1 week later, outside of the monolith, which was the border of the human living area, was the area where the protozoa rampaged without restraint. It was all listed as an unexplored area in international intelligence. In such an extremely dangerous place, Noah stood on a piece of land that was the color of a rotten tree trunk. He looked at the dark gray sky, and his dark and deep eyes were filled with a kind of unprecedented blankness. In this week's time, other than learning the language and communication in the Tokyo area, Noah spent the rest of his time hunting protozoa outside of the monolith. Noah did not have the currency of this world. Therefore, after inadvertently learning that some research facilities were purchasing parts of protozoa's bodies for research, Noah often came to hunt protozoa. By selling parts of the protozoa's bodies, he earned some living expenses. And now, after a week of this life, Noah had basically solved the communication and language problems. Therefore, he also learned about the cruel reality. Noah, who carried a weapon with him, seemed to be mistaken for a police officer. The so-called police officer was the abbreviation of a civilian police company. It was a civilian organization that was responsible for dealing with protozoa-related incidents. The main job of the police was to eliminate the protozoa that broke into the human living area from the outside. Because it was in the form of a civilian company, the police usually carried out their tasks in the form of a commission. The content of the task did not only include eliminating the invading protozoa, but also various tasks such as bodyguard, escort, search, and so on. Sometimes, they also had to accept the government's instructions and carry out the task. From this point of view, the nature of the police's work was similar to that of a sorcerer. However, the difference was that the police were usually carried out by two people. One was the police officer. The other was the cursed child. A special human born with the emergence of protozoa, the cursed child. They were children who had the protozoa virus's genes. Because the mother ingested the protozoa virus during pregnancy, the virus accumulated in the fetus's body and was born. Thus, they had a certain level of protozoa's ability, which was superior physical ability and regenerative ability. Because the cursed child was infected in the embryonic stage, but because the speed of mutation was very slow, they had a high-speed self-healing ability, agility, and strength that exceeded that of humans. And when the cursed child liberated the protozoa virus in their body and gained power, the phenomenon that appeared was that they would turn into dark red pupils. That was the best proof of their status as a cursed child. Because the cursed child had the power to rival the protozoa, people used this power completely in the war against the protozoa. Therefore, the police officers of the civilian police company were all in groups of two people. They were carriers of the protozoa virus, or the cursed child. Because they could use the power of the protozoa virus and had the physical regeneration ability of the protozoa, they were the main combat force of the two-person team. This type of person who formed a partnership with the police and was also the cursed child was collectively known as the initiator. And as the partner of the initiator to assist in the battle and provide core support to the initiator, they were usually the guardians of the initiator. Most of them were ordinary humans. Although their combat ability might not be as good as the initiator, they were basically good fighters. They were responsible for giving orders and had the intangible responsibility of being the spiritual pillar of the initiator. They were collectively known as promoters. Because the protozoan virus had appeared less than 10 years ago, the initiator, or rather, the cursed child, were all children under the age of 10. And they were all women. This group of little girls who were born without knowing anything were not only used as props, but because of the protozoa virus in their bodies, they were not treated as humans at all. Monsters. This was the reason why the little girl with dark red eyes was rejected and even attacked by people. After knowing this, Noah finally understood. This world was not only full of despair, but also darker and more unbearable than he imagined. Looking at the Tokyo area where the monolith was located, Noah was speechless for a long time. After a long time, he looked at the fairy's coat of arms on the back of his hand and clenched his fist tightly. At this moment, Noah made a decision. Chapter 84. The sun dispelled the darkness, making it even darker than the darkness. The monolith that surrounded the Tokyo area could be seen from afar under the sky. Today, the huge rectangular black wall with a height of 1,618 kilometers and a width of 1 kilometer was still like an iron tower that connected the sky and the earth. It stood in people's line of sight at a certain distance. Undoubtedly, if such a scene existed in the natural landscape, it would be so out of place, but for some reason, it made people feel awe. However, that was also to be expected. After all, only the area in the middle of the monolith was the last paradise left for the humans of this world. In the blink of an eye, the demarcation line between the areas where humans and primitive animals lived by the monolith had existed for 10 years. Because of the war, the areas in the Tokyo area that could be preserved intact were unified and divided into 43 areas. Starting from District 1, which was the center of the Tokyo area, the closer it was to the border of the monolith, the larger the number of districts, all the way to District 43. Beyond that would be the unexplored territory of the protozoa. And in the periphery of the 43 districts in the Tokyo area, which was closer to the monolith, or even the border area, no one was willing to live in. They were collectively called the outer district. Here, people's breath was sparse to a terrifying degree. Moreover, incredible things could be seen everywhere. For example, it was unimaginable that the footprints of huge monsters came from humans. For example, a chair stained with blood. For example, a four-wheeled car with a broken window. The inside of the car was bright red like rust, which made people think of the unknown color of blood. Another example was the unknown reddish-purple weeds that grew from the cracks of the stone. The ground here was basically barren like the wilderness. The buildings seemed to have been trampled by some monster and were comparable to ruins. This was the outer district of the Tokyo area, a place that no one was willing to go near, let alone live there. However, in such a desperate area, in the 39th district, there was such a place. A place surrounded by walls, the size of a small town. There were many buildings that were obviously new. Compared to the ruins outside the walls, the buildings were quite intact. Although these buildings couldn't be compared to the high-rise buildings in the inner district of the Tokyo area, they were still regular residences. Presumably, for those who lived in the outer district all year round, abandoned by their biological parents, and rejected by the people, this was definitely a dream paradise. And if one looked carefully, they would find. In this small area surrounded by walls, at the top of the only gate, there was a plaque hanging. On the plaque was written, "Fairy Tale. President. President." In a school the size of an elementary school, Noah, who was reading a thick book, was surrounded by a group of girls who were less than 10 years old who had just finished class. They pestered Noah with their crisp voices as if they were acting spoiled. "Tell us a story, President." "Another story?" There were already 2 or 3 children climbing on top of Noah, who was hanging on top of him, put down the book in his hand. The expression on his face was gentle, but his tone was somewhat helpless. "In class, there should be a teacher who will tell you a story, right? The teacher's words are not as interesting as the president's." The children shouted out. "We want to hear the president's story." Okay. Noah could only shrug his shoulders and pull down the children who were hanging on him. After pondering for a moment, he smiled slightly. "Do you know why we call this place Fairy Tale?" The children naturally shook their heads, their faces filled with curiosity and bewilderment. In fact, whether the fairy has a tail or not, or even whether the fairy exists, this point no one knows. Facing the gazes of the children, Noah spoke softly in a tone that sounded as if it came from a faraway place. "But it is precisely because of this that an eternal mystery will become an eternal hope. I created Fairy Tale to tell everyone that, just like the mystery of whether a fairy has a tail or not, or even whether it exists, never give up hope." Noah looked around at the children who more or less had a longing expression on their faces and closed his eyes. "One day, you will also have to step foot in the outside world and come into contact with the people in the outside world. At that time, you will definitely encounter all kinds of difficulties. However, even if there are people who reject you, hate you, make things difficult for you, or even want to hurt you, you cannot give up hope. As long as you believe in hope, the fairy will definitely appear by your side. So, never forget. It doesn't matter if you are the cursed child that everyone hates, you are still a member of Fairy's Tale. Fairy's Tale will always be your home." Hearing this, the children's faces all showed a happy expression. This kind of expression also made Noah's heart feel unusually peaceful. Noah would never forget that a year ago, when he first came to the outer area, the faces of the cursed children here were gray, alert, indifferent, and had red eyes that seemed to hate everything in the world. For the sake of these cursed children, Noah had worried a lot for the past year. Now, he was finally able to let fairy tale become the hope in these children's hearts, allowing these children to live the lives of ordinary children. And this was all that Noah could do. Of course, in this way, there were also all kinds of troubles. President Noah, a middle-aged man in a black suit with a gun at his waist, said expressionlessly at the door. The car is already waiting outside. That person is also waiting for President Noah's visit. President Noah, please take some time and come with us. Noah glanced at the middle-aged man and did not say anything. Instead, he said to the children around him, "Okay, it's time for class. You all should go back to the classroom." Yes, the children immediately left obediently and returned to the classroom. Noah then reached out and took the long cloth bag that had been on the ground beside him. He stood up and walked out of the door. Tokyo, District 1. In this place called the heart of Tokyo, a long limousine drove from afar and finally stopped in front of a building. A person in a suit like a bodyguard appeared out of nowhere and opened the door of the limousine. Noah, who was sitting inside, got out of the car and stood in front of the building in front of him. That's probably the so-called neo-Gothic style building, right? The curved window glass embedded in the white and smooth stone pillars shaped like ivory, and the wavy slanted door. Many parts of the luxurious building in front of him used the aesthetics that Noah saw in books. It was a palace that people couldn't find fault with. Noah just glanced at such a building, and then, accompanied by 2 guards, he was led into the building called Holy Residence. It didn't take long for the 2 guards to open a huge door and let Noah walk into a brightly lit hall. In the hall, the 2 people opened their eyes as soon as Noah came in. They seemed to have closed their eyes tightly until just now, as if they were resting, and their eyes focused on Noah. Looking at the 2 people in front of him who were undoubtedly big shots, Noah's eyes flashed. Chapter 85. Bang! As if on purpose, the door of the hall was slammed shut, letting the loud bang reverberate throughout the hall. Noah did not care about this threatening action. He looked up and looked at the other 2 people present other than him. It was a combination of a man and a woman. The first thing that attracted Noah's attention was a pure white girl sitting on a rather noble sofa. The girl's age was about the same as Noah's, maybe even 1 or 2 years younger. She wore a paper-thin pure white dress, very similar to a wedding dress, and a sun hat on her head, as if she was wearing a large amount of snow. It was easy to attract attention. The girl's skin was naturally white like a pearl. Her shoulder-length curly short hair, and her face was so straight that it made people lose their minds. It was as if a superb painter had spent his life painstakingly drawing such a beautiful face. No one could ignore it. Even Noah looked at the snow-white girl and narrowed his eyes. Seiko. Of course, this was not the girl's real name. It was similar to the nature of inheritance, a title only left for people of the girl's current status. 10 years ago, the country called Japan was forced to be divided into 5 regions because of the persecution of primitive animals. The girl in front of him, who was the same age as Noah, was the ruler of the region where Noah was located, the Tokyo region. The other person was standing behind the sofa where Seiko was sitting. He was over 70 years old, with a serious expression, a straight back, and a tall figure, wearing a kimono culottes. He was the assistant official in charge of supporting Seiko. He was in the true sense of the highest authority of politicians, the Prime Minister of Tendo Chrysanthemum. In other words, now, the 2 people in front of Noah were the 2 people with the highest status in the Tokyo region. Facing these 2 decision-makers who could have the greatest impact on the entire Tokyo region in various senses, Noah couldn't help but size them up a little and then walked forward. As if waiting for Noah to come closer, Seiko didn't open her red lips until Noah came in front of her and spoke in a beautiful voice. Nice to meet you, Fairy Tale's president, Mr. Noah Doria. I've heard a lot about you. It is indeed the first time we've met. In response to the greeting of the supreme ruler of the Tokyo region, Noah just responded faintly. Then, he turned his gaze to the Tendo Chrysanthemum Prime who had been staring at him. However, I've had quite a few dealings with this person over here. With the appearance of this sentence, the atmosphere dropped to the freezing point. The gazes of Noah and the celestial child, Chrysanthemum Prime, seemed to have ignited fierce sparks, filled with a feeling of mutual hostility. Noah was speaking the truth. It was already not the first time Noah came into contact with the celestial Chrysanthemum Prime. Fairy Tale was built by Noah a year ago in the outskirts of the Tokyo area. It changed the miserable life of the cursed children and gave them shelter. However, this upright and plain-spoken old man in front of him was an existence that could never get along with Fairy Tale. Since the outbreak of the Protozoa War 10 years ago, humanity faced the greatest crisis in history. The population of 8 billion was reduced to only 1/10 in a short period of time. One could imagine how many people's families died in the hands of the protozoa. These people who survived the Protozoa War, and most of them were robbed of their loved ones by the protozoa. Most of them hated the protozoa and the cursed children who had the protozoa virus in their bodies. Their discrimination against the cursed children was very serious. Therefore, they were also known as the plundered generation. As for those born after the Protozoa War, including the cursed children, they were known as the pure generation. Chrysanthemum Prime was the representative of the plundered generation. His wife was also killed in the hands of the protozoa. Because of this, the celestial child, Chrysanthemum Prime Minister, hated the primordial intestines and the cursed child to the extreme. He naturally hated the Fairy Tale, who had taken in many of the cursed children, and could be said to be the gathering place of the cursed children. In the past year, ever since the establishment of Fairy Tale, this person had been secretly plotting against Fairy Tale. It was also because of Chrysanthemum Prime that Noah, in the past year, went from being unaccustomed and at a loss when it came to conspiracies at the beginning to now, he had gained a variety of experience and ways to deal with the smooth confrontation of the dark side and the regime. Chrysanthemum Prime actually did not want to take Noah's life. However, if that could destroy the fairy's tale and the cursed child, the celestial child Chrysanthemum Prime definitely wouldn't mind doing so. Noah didn't hate the celestial Chrysanthemum Prime Minister. However, for this person who discriminated against the cursed child and tried to kill the cursed child, if there was a chance, Noah would definitely not hesitate to pull him down from his position. Because of this, Noah and the celestial Chrysanthemum Prime Minister definitely couldn't be considered old friends. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were sworn enemies. To be honest, I really admire Mr. Noah for being able to establish an organization like Fairy Tale in just a short year. Saint Sun, who clearly knew this, seemed to want to change the topic. Now, other than the Tokyo area, rumors of the fairy tale have also begun to spread in the 4 other areas. Recently, not to mention the Tokyo area, even the cursed children in the other 4 areas have risked their lives to join the fairy tale, crossing unexplored territory and coming to the Tokyo area. This really surprised me. Is that so? Noah's eyes seemed to want to see through Saint Sun's heart. But, Saint Sun, you didn't ask me to come here this time to praise me, right? I do have something to talk to you about, Mr. Noah. Sensing that Noah wanted to get to the heart of the matter, Saint Sun pondered for a moment and no longer hid it. Mr. Noah, you should know that the existence of Fairy Tale has a great impact on the Tokyo area and the other 4 areas, right? Now, as long as you live in the former land of Japan, no matter where you are, you will know that Fairy's Tale is the only paradise that can accommodate the cursed child and allow the cursed child to live a normal life without discrimination. Tentong Kikushima said indifferently. Even in foreign countries, there seems to be rumors of this, causing a lot of cursed children to become restless. Oh! Noah's expression did not change. And then? What are you trying to say? Mr. Noah. Saint Sun said this sentence with an almost puppet-like expression. The people of the International Initiator Supervising Organization should have had a lot of contact with you, right? Noah did not refute. His expression was still as usual, but he acquiesced to Saint Sun's words. The International Initiator Supervising Organization, abbreviated as IISO, is an international organization that manages and allocates the initiator and promoter partners. Mr. Noah, you have taken in a large number of cursed children, which has hindered the management of IISO. Saint's son said seriously. No, it should be said that your actions have caused harm to the world to a certain extent. Chapter 86. Noah's actions had caused harm to the world? It might be easy to think of this as exaggeration, but Noah understood why the Holy Son of Heaven would say this. In this desperate era, even if there was the existence of the chi that could suppress the rebirth of the protozoa, humans could only barely survive the confrontation with the protozoa and would not be completely wiped out. Under such circumstances, the police force formed by the initiator and the promoter, who could fight against the protozoa, was the world's last hope. It was said that the most powerful initiator could even influence the military situation of the entire world. From this, it could be seen how important the cursed children, who could display abilities comparable to that of the protozoa, and had the precursor of the protozoa virus in their bodies, were. However, due to the existence of the fairy tale, the number of initiators began to decrease sharply. I heard that the people from the International Initiator Supervision Organization, IISO, had contacted Fairy Tale, hoping that Fairy Tale could provide them with the cursed child, so that they could use the cursed child as an initiator and assign it to the police as a partner. However, Mr. Noah rejected them, right? Elysium's expression was very serious. With all due respect, Mr. Noah, your actions will cause many police partners that can fight the protozoa to be unable to be born, indirectly causing us to lose a large amount of power to fight the protozoa. Do you know that? Hearing this, Noah more or less understood the Holy Son of Heaven's intention. In other words, Lord Holy Son of Heaven, you want to persuade me? Noah looked at the Holy Son of Heaven with a smile that was not a smile. You want me to compromise and provide the people from Fairy Tale to be manipulated by you to form the so-called police partners? Mr. Noah, I heard that you also obtained your police license a year ago, but you refused to be the initiator partner assigned by the International Initiator Supervision Organization, IISO, right? Elysium asked sincerely. Why did you do that? Why? Noah glanced at Chrysanthemum Prime and closed his eyes. A cold smile that was rarely seen 1 year ago appeared on his face. Because I am very disgusted by this kind of method that casually distributes children like tools. The Holy Son of Heaven was slightly startled and then fell silent. Lord Elysian Son of Heaven, I'm sure you know why I created Fairy Tale, right? Noah looked straight at Elysian Son of Heaven. To be honest, if the people from the International Initiator Monitoring Organization, IISO, would conduct a strict assessment of the police officers who need to be assigned to the initiator, then I wouldn't have any objections. However, what surprised me was that the IISO didn't even investigate the character of the police officers who need to be assigned to the initiator. Basically, as long as they are police officers, they will assign the initiator to them. That's right. Noah took a step forward, his dark pupils like arrows meeting Elysian Son of Heaven's eyes. To them, it doesn't matter what kind of treatment the children receive, or what kind of treatment their police partners will give them. As long as they can form a police partner and fight against the primitive animals, they don't need to consider anything else. I created Fairy Tale because I don't want the children to be treated cruelly and discriminated against. I want them to be able to live like ordinary people. Noah's voice echoed throughout the hall of the Holy Son of Heaven and Chrysanthemum Prime's ears. Therefore, I can't agree with the International Initiator Monitoring Organization, IISO's practice of not caring that the children will be abused by the police partners in name, so I rejected them. But your rejection is really endangering the entire world and mankind. Before Elysian Son of Heaven could speak, Chrysanthemum Prime's cold voice sounded. Can you bear the responsibility for the extinction of mankind? Guilt. Noah laughed. His laughter was unusually sarcastic. Then, in the eyes of the celestial assistant, no matter how the cursed child is abused to death, it's not a crime, right? Those people are just monsters, demons that destroy the world. They are not human at all. If they are not human, what crime is it to kill them all? These words all sounded in Chrysanthemum Prime's heart after hearing Noah's words. However, Chrysanthemum Prime didn't say it out loud. He just stared at Noah. His cold gaze could poke a hole in Noah's body. Noah sneered and turned his gaze back to Elysian, son of heaven, who was more or less speechless. No matter where it is, humans seem to have a saying that the police partnership formed by the initiator and promoter is the last hope of the world, but in my opinion, this saying is no different from a joke. In front of the two highest rulers of Tokyo, Noah said these words coldly. On one hand, one of the police partners, the cursed child, is the last hope of the world, but on the other hand, more than 90% of the people treat the hope in their mouth as garbage that needs to be swept away. Humans are really a kind of stupid creatures that like to carry out contradictions to the end and smash their own feet with a rock. This time, not to mention Elysian, son of heaven, even Chrysanthemum Prime was speechless. Noah curled his lips in boredom, took out a stack of paper from his jacket, and threw it on the table in front of Elysian, son of heaven. This is... Elysian, son of heaven and Chrysanthemum Prime both looked at the paper in front of them at the same time, then they were stunned and surprised. The personal information of the police partners of the initiator and promoter? That is the relevant information of the police partners that were personally reviewed by Fairy Tale, and the cursed child, in Fairy Tale were assigned to qualified police partners. Noah turned his gaze to Chrysanthemum Prime and said as if he was provoking him. Let's not talk about whether or not I can bear the responsibility of the extinction of humanity, but Fairy Tale will not hide the real hope of the world. Not only do we have schools, hospitals, and children's residences, we even have an initiator training facility for children who want to become combat forces, to train children into qualified initiators. There are quite a few active initiators on this list. The two of you can find out with a little investigation. In front of Elysian, son of heaven and Chrysanthemum Prime, Noah said indifferently, I believe that the initiators that came out of my fairy tale will definitely not be worse than the other initiators, and this is also the reason why the International Initiator Supervision Organization, IISO, compromised with us and admitted that we can self-distribute the initiators internally. After saying this, Noah turned around. Then, the two of you should have nothing to say, right? Elysian, son of heaven and Chrysanthemum Prime were both silent. Noah also directly walked out of the hall under the silent gaze of Elysian, son of heaven and Chrysanthemum Prime. The hall of the holy residence was silent, and no one spoke for a long time. Chapter 87. Tokyo, District 39, Fairy Tale. In his own residence, Noah casually tossed aside the long cloth bag that had been slung over his shoulder. Then, he sat down on the sofa in a paralyzed manner. One of his hands covered his eyes and his whole body exuded an aura of exhaustion. If possible, Noah would rather fight to the death with the protozoa for an entire day and night than engage in a conversation with those in power like the Holy Son of Heaven and Chrysanthemum Tenzin. That would be too tiring. Even after an entire year, Noah had basically gotten used to this kind of tiredness and was unwilling to be tormented like this. After 1 year, he had fully understood the dark side of human nature and assimilated himself into this world of despair. Only then did Noah realize how wonderful the days he spent in the fairy tale were. That caused Noah to miss the fairy tale almost every day. He missed his companions who grew up together with him. Of course, due to Noah's intervention, this world now had the existence of the fairy tale. No matter what, regardless of which world the fairy tale belonged to, Noah would do his best to protect it. No matter how tiring, no matter how bitter, as long as he could achieve this goal, it would be worth it. Forget it, I won't think about it anymore. Noah rubbed his eyebrows and turned his head to look at the door of a room. He stood up and walked over. Pushing open the door, Noah walked into the room. It was an extremely dim room. There were no fluorescent lights on the ceiling and there were no windows around. In such a dim room, there was an apparatus that was as tall as a person. In the middle of the apparatus was a culture tank the size of a thumb connected to it. It was a culture tank filled with an unknown liquid. It appeared as though it was boiling and bubbling. If there was an expert here who had a good understanding of the protozoa, they would be shocked to discover that the unknown liquid in the culture tank was a processed protozoa virus. It was not a virus extracted from the protozoa's body and filtered out of the body fluids and blood. Instead, it was the most primitive virus that infected in the form of a virus, causing the protozoa to appear in the protozoa. Usually, humans and even living creatures would be infected with the protozoa virus, and the protozoa could only be infected through the blood. In other words, the protozoa virus could not be infected through the air. Otherwise, humans would have long ceased to exist in this world. However, that did not mean that the protozoa virus did not exist in the air. In fact, experts had long since proven that the protozoa virus could also be active in the air. They would enter through the mouth of humans, but they would not infect humans and cause the protozoa. This was a theory that had been confirmed after countless experiments. However, although the protozoan virus that entered the mouth of a human wouldn't infect them, it wouldn't cause immediate death either. If the airborne protozoan virus happened to enter a pregnant woman's body through her oral cavity, the pregnant woman would sometimes give birth to a fetus with protozoan DNA in its body. Most of the cursed children came from this. The device in front of him was a device that could extract the protozoa virus in the air and collect all kinds of protozoa viruses. Although the culture tank filled with protozoa viruses was only the size of a thumb, there were at least hundreds of protozoa viruses mixed with species factors inside. With such a high concentration of protozoa viruses, if anyone accidentally let even 1% of them enter their body, they would probably instantly transform into a protozoa and become a complete monster. It was impossible for Noah not to know that. However, Noah's next move would definitely make the onlookers dizzy. Gotcha! They saw Noah reach into the culture tank the size of a thumb and take out a test tube connected to a needle from the device below the culture tank. Then he stabbed it into his arm without hesitation. In the culture tank, the protozoa viruses that had gathered into a thick liquid form immediately flowed through the device and into the test tube. In less than 10 seconds, they were all injected into Noah's body. In the next moment, Noah's pair of dark pupils that were as deep as the stars trembled violently. In the blink of an eye, they all turned crimson and dyed Noah's pupils red. That pair of blood-red eyes were exactly the same as the cursed child's. Thump, thump. Noah's heart was beating violently. Gulp. While his whole body was releasing a shocking amount of heat, Noah's vision began to distort up and down. The illusion that his limbs seemed to be expanding outwards also appeared. Bang! His muscles seemed to be burning, causing Noah's arm that was pierced with the needle to tremble. The needle that was stuck in his body was immediately pushed out of his body like a bullet and bounced off. Creak! Noah's chest made such a sound. In an instant, it expanded greatly, and the bones in his body also made abnormal sounds of friction. It was under such circumstances that the protozoa viruses injected into Noah's body strengthened Noah's body at an unimaginable speed. Because of the protozoa viruses in their bodies, the cursed children possessed high-speed self-regeneration ability and physical strength that ordinary people could not possess. Moreover, the protozoa viruses in the cursed children's bodies contained animal factors that would also give them various advantages and abilities that this kind of animal possessed. Now, Noah had been injected with the protozoa viruses that contained at least hundreds of species factors. The strengthening he received was also hundreds of times that of an ordinary cursed child. At the same time, he could also obtain the advantages and abilities of this species factor. Unfortunately, if Noah, who was not a cursed child, continued to be affected by the protozoa viruses like this, he would only end up becoming a protozoa. Only Noah knew that he would never become a protozoa. The following scene also proved this point. After an unknown amount of time, the abnormalities in Noah's body began to stop. His body that was shaking like lice also slowly returned to calmness. The crimson pupils faded bit by bit, and the ominous color gradually disappeared until a certain moment, the dark pupils that belonged to Noah returned once again. Phew! Noah, who had been suppressing the sudden changes in his body, exhaled a long breath. He shook his arms and felt his body that had once again undergone a great deal of strengthening. No matter how many times I go through it, I will always be surprised by my physique. Noah's physique was different from ordinary people. It had characteristics that ordinary people did not have. One of these characteristics was that it could eliminate all negative forces and side effects that acted on Noah's body. This included viruses. Under the effect of Noah's physique, the protozoa viruses that entered Noah's body not only got rid of the side effects of protozoa, but even the property of existing in the form of a virus was judged by Noah's body as a side effect and was completely broken down. Therefore, the protozoa viruses that entered Noah's body only left behind the effects of purely strengthening the body and bringing about various species' advantages and abilities. During this year, Noah would inject the protozoa viruses into his body almost every other month. With the help of his physique and the protozoa viruses, his strength had been greatly improved during this year. Therefore, even though he still needed to spend time and effort on the operation of Fairy Tale, Noah's strength had still been greatly improved. After reinstalling the culture tank on the apparatus and activating the apparatus to collect the airborne protozoa viruses, Noah walked out of the room. The next time he came would be another month later. Ding dong! As if the time was calculated, Noah's doorbell rang. Chapter 88. Ding dong! Noah, who had just come out of his room, heard the doorbell ring. He was slightly startled, but immediately his outstanding sensing ability clearly reflected the aura of the people outside the door to Noah, making Noah, who recognized the identity of the people outside, roll his eyes. Walking forward, Noah directly opened the door. The next moment, 3 figures were imprinted in his eyes. The people who came were a boy and a girl around 16 or 17 years old, and a little girl around 10 years old. Standing in front of the boy and girl was a little girl around 10 years old. The little girl was wearing a fashionable checkered lined jacket, a short skirt, and a pair of thick boots. Her slightly swaying ponytails were pinned with a slightly large hairpin, and she had a big bright smile on her face. Standing behind the little girl on the left was a beautiful girl in black. She had a head of soft black hair that reached her waist, a sharp contrast with her snow-white skin. She was wearing a student sailor uniform, her eyes were slender, and she had a beautiful face. Standing to the right of the little girl was a listless young man. The youth was wearing a pure black student uniform that looked like a suit. The youth's left chest was pinned with an unknown high school badge, and there was a pistol at his waist. With one look, one could tell that he was not an ordinary student. Such a trio appeared in front of Noah just like that, with a smile on their faces. The difference was that the little girl's smile was the kind of lively and cute expression that came from the heart, while the smile on the faces of the youth and girl standing behind her was more or less fawning. Noah pretended not to see the youth and girl standing behind him, and greeted the cheerful little girl. Yenju. President. The little girl named Yenju directly threw herself at Noah, hanging onto Noah's body. I miss you so much. President. Liar. Undoubtedly, we just greeted each other in class this morning. Noah mercilessly pulled Yenju, who was hanging on his body, ignoring her dissatisfied expression, and patted her head. You seem to have grown a bit, right? Hearing this, Yenju's eyes lit up and said excitedly, Is it the chest? As soon as she finished speaking, Noah directly knocked Yenju's head, causing her to cry out in pain. At the same time, he corrected her expressionlessly. It's height. Hey. President Noah. The girl who had been ignored all this time seemed to lack patience. She stepped forward and pointed at her own nose, emphasizing her presence. We're here too. It's you? Unfortunately, Noah's reaction was extremely cold. Tomato-san and Riken-san, long time no see. Don't call me Tian Tong, just call me Mu Gung. Tian Tong Mu wrinkled his nose and said with some displeasure. Guild leader Noah, you're doing this on purpose, right? Is that so? Noah's reaction was still as cold as ever. Then I'm really sorry. Hey, Noah, you don't have to be so cold to us, do you? Rinken scratched his head. In any case, we've known each other for a year, we can be considered old friends, right? Then, my old friends Raikan-san and Raikan-san, why don't you let me guess the purpose of your visit? Noah suddenly smiled. If my guess is correct, the reason for your visit should be because the income of the Tentong Civilian Police Company last month was infinitely close to zero, and there was no business this month. Therefore, as the president, Tentong Mugino, and the police officers under his company saw that Rintaro was in a predicament where even his living expenses might be difficult, so they had no choice but to come to me, hoping that I would share some of the commissions that Fairy Tale received with you. Noah cast his gaze on Rinken Rintaro and Tendo Mugino, who both had frozen expressions. He narrowed his eyes. I'm right? Hee hee. Raikan-san and Raikan-san maintained their frozen expression and dryly laughed twice. Yen Zhu, on the other hand, jumped up and down happily. As expected of the president of Fairy Tale, you guessed it all right. Is it really like this? Noah speechlessly looked at Raikan-san and Raikan-san. I say, how can there be people like you running a police company to the point where you need to get commissioned work from other places? What can we do? Raikan-san said even more angrily. It's all because our company's members are too useless. They can't make our company's name known, and their strength is so weak, of course people won't want to look for us. Is that really the case? Raikan-san couldn't help but whisper and refute. The problem should be that the building where our company is located, the first floor is for gay, the second floor is for nightclubs, and the fourth floor is for loan sharks, right? If Raikan-san is really a powerful police officer, the customers won't care about this at all. Raikan-san glared at Raikan-san, and then looked at Noah. His face hung a fake smile that couldn't be more fake. Well, anyway, President Noah's Fairy Tale receives a lot of commissions every day, right? It's okay to share some with us, right? The police's job is to solve matters related to gastronomic animals. Compared to purely police officers, the nature of Fairy Tale is quite complicated. Fairy Tale has schools, hospitals, residences, and even initiator training facilities specially provided for the cursed child, and the money to maintain these facilities almost all came from Noah's personal wealth. By hunting gastronomic animals and selling their bodies to the research facilities for gastronomic animals, thus obtaining benefits. In the beginning, Noah used this method to earn money and then used all the money to establish Fairy Tale, which led to the birth of Fairy Tale. And when Fairy Tale was truly operating, Noah used the internal initiator to form partners with police officers that he approved of, and invited these police officers' partners into Fairy Tale. Under the name of Fairy Tale, they went out to work, earned a lot of money, and put Fairy Tale on the right track. Ordinary police officers under a civilian police company went out to work for a salary, and all the remuneration they received went to the company. Noah, on the other hand, let Fairy Tale learn from the other world's Fairy Tale. He made every commission into a commission form and posted it on the commission board. He let the police officers under him choose their own jobs, and 70% of the remuneration would go to the police officers themselves. This method of operation also attracted a lot of foreign police officers. After all, if they worked in Fairy Tale, as long as they were willing to work hard, the remuneration would definitely be much higher than the salary of ordinary police officers. In this way, Fairy Tale, as an alternative police organization, was recognized by many people in the industry. Now, Fairy Tale was one of the most famous police organizations in the Tokyo area. This was also the reason why these two thick-skinned people often came to visit Noah. Bang! Tenzo Mu threw a heavy punch, hitting Raikan Rintaro's abdomen. Wooey! Raikan Rintaro suddenly let out a strange cry, holding his stomach and lying on the ground. Tenzo Mu immediately kneeled down, holding Raikan Rintaro's head, and made a kneeling posture. We will abide by the rules of Fairy Tale and only take 70% of the remuneration, so please work for us, otherwise we can only starve to death. Noah looked up to the sky and sighed, completely speechless. Chapter 89. In a gymnasium in Fairy Tale, Noah was currently confronting Rintaro Rikken and Yenju Lan Yuan, a pair of police officers. 10 minutes ago, Tian Tong Mu had happily gone to the main building where the police officers of Fairy Tale gathered and rested, where the commission orders were posted on the board. Rinzan Taro, Lan Yuan, and Yen Zhu, who were left behind, were called over by Noah to present such a scene. Opposite Noah, Rintaro kept sighing with a listless face, as if he was about to die. Lan Yuan Yen Zhu, on the other hand, looked eager to try. Noah, who was amused by the contrast between the two, smiled. "You can attack me anytime." But Yen Zhu shouted, which made Rinzan Taro sigh even louder. "Do we really have to test her? Let me see how much your strength has improved." Noah smiled. "After all, I was the one who personally taught Yen Zhu battle techniques a year ago. Although Yen Zhu comes back every day, I haven't tested her strength again. As for you, Rintaro, as Yen Zhu's partner, why don't you show off a little bit of your strength? Then why don't you just let Yen Zhu fight you? I'll just forget about it." Rinzan Taro shook his head. "I'm so weak, I don't even know where my IP ranking is. How can I be your opponent?" IP ranking. Developed and published by the International Instigator Monitoring Organization, IISO. The ranking of police partners is based on the number of protozoa each existing police partner has taken down and the results they have achieved. Although there were all kinds of problems with this ranking, such as the mutual promotion, restraint, and compatibility between individuals, some were better at fighting with humans, some were better at fighting with animals, and some were better at fighting with animals. There were also some strong people who did not want to be too high profile, and there were also some new stars who were just starting out. However, basically, the ranking given by the International Initiator Supervision Organization, IISO, was the standard to measure the popularity and strength of a pair of police partners. And if I'm not mistaken, Noah, you must have hunted down a lot of protozoa in the past year in order to gather enough funds to establish Fairy Tale, right? Rintaro felt like he was about to break out in a cold sweat. He asked with a respectful attitude. "Then, what's your IP ranking now? It's been almost half a year since I've hunted a protogut animal. Plus, I've been rejecting the initiator partner that the International Initiator Supervision Organization, IISO, arranged for me. They don't seem to have any intention of raising my ranking." Noah spread his hands. "So, if you ask me what my IP ranking is, I can only tell you that I don't know myself." "Hey!" Yen Zhu was the first to cry out in dissatisfaction. "The president is so strong, how can those guys not raise your ranking?" Sigh. Rinzan Taro covered his head. "Even so, how can I beat someone who can teach the cursed child fighting skills, and who was personally acknowledged by Yen Zhu to be strong? Don't you still have Yen Zhu as your partner?" Seeing Rinzan Taro dragging his feet, even Noah was starting to get impatient. "Anyway, don't hold back, just attack. Rinzan Taro, it's okay if you use a gun, use all your skills." "Use a gun?" Rinzan Taro looked at Noah in shock, his face full of uncertainty. "You really want me to use a gun? Rinzan Taro, you're really indecisive." Noah was helpless. "Just do what I say. Do you think I'm going to kill myself?" "But..." Rinzan Taro seemed to want to say something, but this time he was interrupted by Yen Zhu, who was also getting impatient. "Rinzan Taro, you'll suffer if you underestimate the president. If you don't want to fight, I'll do it." As soon as she finished speaking, Yen Zhu's eyes instantly turned crimson. "Yen Zhu!" Rinzan Taro was immediately shocked. When the eyes turned crimson, it was a sign that the cursed child had released the protozoa virus in her body. Therefore, when the cursed child's eyes turned crimson, she would be able to obtain a power that was comparable to the protozoa, or even far surpass the protozoa. Rinzan Taro didn't know how strong Noah was, but wasn't it a little too much to release the power of the cursed child to deal with an ordinary human? However, Yen Zhu completely ignored Rintaro, who had cried out and failed to stop him in time. Instead, she bent forward. "I'm on you." As soon as she finished speaking, bang! With a loud stomping sound, Yen Zhu's small body shot out like a rocket. Whoosh! A sharp sound of breaking through the air rang out. Yen Zhu almost instantly reduced the distance of 10 meters between her and Noah to 0 and appeared in front of Noah. "Hiya!" Immediately, Yen Zhu jumped up, turned around, and kicked Noah's head with a violent force that caused the air to tremble. Seeing that there wasn't even a sonic boom, even if this kick landed on a piece of steel, it would be able to shatter a piece of steel that was at least a meter thick into pieces, right? Not to mention a human's fragile brain. However, in the face of such a powerful kick from Yen Zhu, Noah only slightly leaned to the side. The powerful kick immediately brushed past Noah's side and kicked the air. At this time, Noah suddenly reached out his hand and grabbed Yen Zhu's small foot, who was about to charge past him due to inertia. He tightened his grip and lifted Yen Zhu upside down. Too many flaws. After saying that, Noah threw Yen Zhu in his hand in Rinzentaro's direction. The screaming Yen Zhu turned into a shadow and heavily smashed into the panicked Rinzentaro. Bang! Amidst the dull thud, Yen Zhu slammed into Ryutaru's abdomen like a cannonball. Ryutaru screamed in pain as he was sent flying along with Yen Zhu, crashing into the ground not too far away. Yen Zhu covered her head with tears in her eyes. So dizzy, oh! Rinzentaro covered his abdomen with a pale face. It hurts. The two of them struggled to get up from the ground, but their visions suddenly darkened. Although the battle was short, I have a rough idea of your current level. Noah sighed. As a rabbit-type initiator, Yen Zhu's speed, leg strength, and kicking have improved a lot compared to a year ago. However, her combat acuity seems to have decreased. Perhaps it's because she's been dealing with low-level protozoa and hasn't met a good opponent? I'm not slacking off. President, Yen Zhu said angrily. For the past year, I've been following President's instructions and training my speed and kicking. I'm not blaming you. With your current strength, as an initiator, it's a bit of an exaggeration to say that you're in the top 100 IP rankings. However, it shouldn't be a problem for you to enter the top 300 IP rankings. Noah patted Yen Zhu's head and glanced at Rinzentaro, who was sitting on the ground. The problem is with me, right? Rinzentaro sighed as if he had given up. I know that Yen Zhu is very strong. It's all because I'm too weak that I'm dragging her down. Are you weak? Noah looked at Rinzentaro deeply and smiled. Maybe. For a moment, Rinzentaro felt like he had been seen through. This made his heart palpitate and he quickly changed the topic. Speaking of which, Noah, I didn't expect you to be so strong. Even Yen Zhu isn't your opponent. You're invincible in close combat among all the police. If you can get a good gun to make up for your long-range combat, it'll be hard to find a match for you in the entire Tokyo area. Hearing this, Noah fell silent. A gun? Chapter 90. Noah raised his head and looked at the building in front of him that was at least 20 meters tall. He squinted his eyes because of the light reflected from the reflective glass. Is this the location of that famous large-scale weapons company, the headquarters of SEMA Heavy Industries? That's right. In addition to Noah, another man who was still in high school at the scene made a speechless response. If possible, I really want to never set foot here like Miss Mugging. If it weren't for your request, Noah, I think Miss Mugging would never let me bring you here, right? After conducting a small test for Rintaro and Yen Zhu in the stadium, Noah asked Rintaro to bring him here as soon as he left the stadium. SEMA Heavy Industries was a well-known weapons company even in other regions. It was even more famous in the Tokyo area. Many police officers were very positive about the alloy weapons produced by this weapon company. After Noah heard that Rintaro's pistol was sponsored by the daughter of the president of SEMA Heavy Industries, he asked Rintaro to bring him here. As for Mugging, when he heard that Noya and Ryutaru were thinking about this place, he had the most unlucky expression on his face. It was as if he had heard some filthy word. Then he strongly expressed that he absolutely did not want to come here. Even Yen Zhu was forced to stay by Mugging. Although he didn't know why Mugino was so disgusted with SEMA Heavy Industries, it was just as Rintaro said. If it wasn't for Noah's request to come here, Mugino might have forced Rintaro to stay. Looking at the evasive expression on Rintaro's face, Noah asked in confusion. What? Is the daughter of the president of SEMA Heavy Industries difficult to deal with? Not difficult to deal with, but extremely difficult to deal with. Rintaro sighed. Forget it, Let's go in and finish this so we can go back early. Noah shrugged and did not object. Under Rentaro's lead, they entered the building across the street. The security guards seemed to have received the news a long time ago. Not long after Noah and Ryotaro entered the building, they appeared on their own and led Noah and Ryotaro into the elevator. However, the elevator didn't go up. Instead, it moved in the direction of the underground. It didn't stop until it reached the 5th floor. Ding! As the sound of the elevator arriving at the destination floor rang out, the elevator door slowly opened. The security guard didn't seem to have any intention of getting out of the elevator. After gesturing to Noah and Ryotaro, he let them out of the elevator. In front of Noah and Rintaro was a vast space. In this place, in addition to the sci-fi-looking corridors that led in all directions, there were also exhibition counters placed around. On the counters, there were all kinds of weapons. There were sniper rifles, pistols, rifles, and other modern weapons. There were also knives, swords, spears, halberds, daggers, and other weapons used for close combat. The only thing that these weapons had in common was the pitch-black luster that symbolized the alloy. It told others that these weapons were manufactured to deal with human enemies. Welcome to SEMA Heavy Industries. After taking a closer look, Noah and Rintaro discovered that in the middle of this vast space stood a girl with a confident smile on her face. It was a young lady with long, wavy, jet-black hair tied into 2 ponytails behind her head. She was wearing a bright-colored kimono as if she was admiring flowers. She looked like a perfect young lady from a wealthy family. At this moment, a girl in a kimono with a strong Japanese style was looking at Noah with interest. Her pretty face with a beauty mole showed a smile as if she was aiming at a prey. This must be the president of Fairy Tale, President Noah, right? Noah was also looking at the girl in front of him. After a while, he nodded his head. I have long heard of your great name, SEMA Heavy Industries President's daughter, Miss Seema Maji. Just call me Maji. Maji took out a fan from her kimono and covered the lower half of her face. Her voice reverberated in the air, making it easy for people to perceive the joy contained within. Speaking of great names, we are the same. I often hear little Riken complaining that there is no business coming to him. More than once, he rejoiced that there is a spendthrift who will provide him with a commission as long as he asks. Oh! Noah glanced at Rintaro with a smile that was not a smile. So you have always thought of me like this? Don't take it seriously. This is definitely not true. Rintaro panicked and glared at Maji. Maji, why are you framing me? Who told little Riken to violate the agreement between us? Maji said as if it was a matter of course. Undoubtedly, we agreed that I will provide you with weapons for free. Little Riken came to class at Gaudian High School, but you skipped class today, didn't you? What can I do? Rintaro had an unspeakable expression. It's not like you don't know our company's financial situation. So today, even Miss Mugging skipped class and went to Fairy Tale to ask for help. Seeing that Rintaro and Maji seemed to intend to continue to pester each other, Noah shook his head and interrupted them. Back to the topic, Miss Maji, the purpose of my visit this time, Rintaro should have told you through the phone, right? Indeed, I have received it. Maji patted the fan in her hand and spread her hands with a smile. Her face was full of pride as if she was performing. Everything here is our SEMA family's proudest work. I believe that President Noah will definitely be satisfied with them. This time, visiting SEMA Heavy Industries and meeting Seema Maji, Noah only had one purpose. Equip himself with a gun. Noah wanted to equip himself with a gun. Of course, this wasn't because Rintaro suggested that Noah should equip himself with a gun to make up for his long-range combat methods. Although Noah's close-range combat was extremely strong compared to the people of this world, and even more so after a year of strengthening from the protozoan virus. Not to mention, Noah's magic night sword could also control the distance at will. Distance was no obstacle to him, but that didn't mean that Noah didn't have any long-range combat methods. After all, Noah was still a magic shooter. The super high-level destruction magic Crush didn't only work on things that Noah personally touched, it could also be used from a distance. However, in this world, as an ordinary person who wasn't a cursed child, Noah couldn't brazenly use magic in order to avoid unnecessary commotion. Therefore, equip himself with a gun was a good way for Noah to conceal himself. Besides, in this world, there was almost no situation where Noah could seriously fight. Therefore, with a gun, he could deal with a lot of situations where he didn't need to personally fight. Because of this, Noah directly shifted his line of sight to the display of guns on the counter. President Noah wants to equip himself with a gun, right? Maji, who clearly saw this point, smiled sweetly. Our company's guns are also very famous in the industry. Although the guns don't need to be made with rhenium alloy, if the rhenium bullets are shot with a good performance gun, the power can be improved a lot. The XD series pistols of Shaorigian are also provided by our company. Speaking until here, Maji also led Noah and Rintaro to one of the display counters. She pointed at the guns placed inside and introduced them. Of course, if ordinary guns can't satisfy President Noah's needs, there are also guns here that have been specially modified by our company. In terms of performance, they can't be compared to the state before modification. Noah naturally heard all of Maji's words. Noah, who glanced at the counter in front of him, quickly fixed his eyes on one of the guns. Chapter 91. It has been a year since he came to this world. Noah has gained a lot of understanding of this world. Among them, it naturally included the understanding of modern weapons like guns. It could be said that Noah's understanding of guns was only at the level of long-range shooting weapons. He knew almost nothing about the types of guns, their advantages, their characteristics, and their manufacturing. Therefore, Noah didn't know whether the gun he was looking at was good or bad. However, just like how some people would feel extremely comfortable with the most suitable tool for themselves, Noah took a fancy to the gun in front of him at first glance. Muri and Rintaro seemed to have noticed Noah's line of sight. They looked over and were both startled. This is... Rintaro tilted his head and asked Muri with some uncertainty. This is a revolver, right? The gun Noah was looking at was a revolver. It wasn't one of those short, cylindrical revolvers that were commonly used by the police. Instead, the revolver's body was almost the same as Rintaro's XD series automatic pistol. It was 8 inches long, and its outer body was also elongated. It was a completely black revolver that had obviously been modified. As a revolver, the appearance of the revolver in front of him was obviously domineering and elegant at the same time. It made people unable to move their eyes away from it at first glance. However, the body of the revolver was indeed a lot longer than the average revolver. It was even longer than the body of an automatic pistol if the magazine of the revolver was included. For more practical people, the feeling of the gun in front of them would probably be that it was a special case to emphasize the beauty of the gun. It would make people wonder whether or not it had good performance. It just so happened that Rintaro was this kind of person. Is this a modified version of the Colt Python revolver? Rintaro couldn't help but interrupt. Most revolvers have a relatively small capacity and a relatively low bullet speed. Moreover, the way to load the ammunition must be manually. The reloading time is too long and the power is relatively low. Although the Colt Python revolver has been improved in power, it still can't do without these shortcomings. How is the performance of this modified gun? If even Xiao Lijian knows about it, then it's impossible that our SEMA company doesn't know about it. Emoji took out the 8-inch long revolver in front of her, and the gun body immediately flashed with an arc of light. This gun's modification rate is at least 80%. Our department's professionals specifically modified the revolver's unique shortcomings, and thus modified this gun. This gun's bullet speed and power have been greatly improved. Emoji said proudly. I can guarantee you that the bullets fired from this gun are as powerful as an anti-tank sniper rifle. Comparable in power to an anti-tank sniper rifle. Rintaro looked at the gorgeous revolver in Muri's hand in surprise. Won't this gun explode? In order to prevent this, we specially modified it. Emoji smiled, but this time, her smile was slightly restrained. Unfortunately, as you can see, even if the bullet speed and power are comparable to an anti-tank sniper rifle, In order to increase its bullet speed and power, the weight of this gun is much heavier than an ordinary revolver. Moreover, the bullet capacity and the number of times it can be loaded is limited to 6, the same as an ordinary revolver. In other words, the bullet speed and power have been greatly improved, but its weight has been increased. In addition, the bullet capacity is also limited to 6, not exceeding the limit of an ordinary revolver? Rintaro muttered. Then, as if he thought of something, he said to Emoji, "No, the bullet speed and power are comparable to an anti-tank sniper rifle. Even if the gun body is strengthened and won't explode or overheat, the recoil is definitely not small, right? Just like what Xiao Lijin said." Emoji spread her hands. "If you want to use this gun, even if you don't care about the fact that it only has 6 bullets, you still need a lot of arm strength. Otherwise, you won't be able to use it at all. So, originally, this gun was specially made for the initiator. Indeed, there won't be any problems if the initiator uses this gun." Ruru was slightly relieved as he turned his gaze to Noah, who had been silent all this while. "However, Noah, you shouldn't choose this gun. It's better to use the XD series automatic pistol like me." Hearing this, Noah looked at the revolver in Muri's hand. After pondering for a while, he said, "I want this one." "Noah?" Rintaro was stunned. "Are you sure?" On the contrary, Muri seemed to have expected Noah to say this. Her eyes flashed with interest. President Noah doesn't care about the fact that it only has 6 bullets, but if you don't have extraordinary arm strength, using this gun isn't a wise choice. Noah smiled indifferently, reached out his hand, took the gun from Muri's hand, and raised it. "Then let me try it a little bit. How about it?" Motion Realism Prism Battle Simulation version 10.0. Start. After the pleasant synthetic voice read out the contents smoothly, Noah realized that he was standing in a huge room that was green all over. The inside of the room was extremely empty, and the light from the high ceiling was so dazzling that it made people unable to open their eyes. In addition, at a certain height, there were several glass windows. Only had time to observe these, Noah heard Muri's mechanical voice from all directions. "President Noah, how do you feel? How do you feel?" Noah looked around. "It's quite strange. Fortunately, I experienced it once." At this time, Noah was in the 5th floor of the SEMA Heavy Industries headquarters, in an open cubic space called the VR Special Training Room, with a diameter of more than 1 kilometer. This was a world-famous virtual combat training facility with high performance. The entire room was made of special rubber. Not only could it use live ammunition, but it could also use various kinds of explosives. In the Yodo area, this was a very famous training facility. The self-defense forces, special police, and even rich busybodies wanted to use this training facility at least once. Therefore, it was said that the appointments from the outside were already arranged on a yearly basis. If you made an appointment now, you would have to wait at least a year before you could use it. However, under Wei Weaver's care, Noah made an exception and got a chance to use this place. While Noah was feeling, the surrounding scenery began to distort violently. The next moment, Noah appeared in a desert. At the same time, a gun appeared in Noah's hand out of thin air. It was the modified revolver Noah wanted to test. The information of the gun has been completely inputted. President Noah is holding the same gun as the previous one, including the weight. Muri's voice constantly sounded from all directions. "President Noah, if there are no problems, we can start at any time." Noah gripped the butt of the gun tightly as if he was holding his own sword. He lowered his arm naturally. "Let's start." As soon as the voice fell, Noah's eyes showed an image reminiscent of an old movie countdown. On one side, there was a black circle, and on the other side, there was a flickering countdown. Not long after, the synthetic voice said, "Mission start." Noah didn't know that in another room, Muri and Rintaro were having such a conversation. "No way?" Rintaro looked at the scene on the monitor and was shocked. Isn't this the famous battlefield where even the 10 elites of the police special assault force were judged to be dead and lost in the end when they challenged the police special assault force in a group battle? Hearing Rintaro's words, Muri's face showed a sinister smile. Chapter 92. Noah's map was a battlefield where he had to face 30 fully armed soldiers. Each soldier was equipped with an extremely advanced rifle. The battlefield was a desert that was difficult to attack and difficult to move. The soldiers would use sand dunes and defensive barriers to defend, but they wouldn't take the initiative to attack. All kinds of unfavorable conditions were impossible for an individual to break through. Even the 10 elites of the police special assault force were judged to be dead in the end and were defeated. It was easy to imagine how difficult it was to conquer this battlefield. It must be known that the elites of the police special assault force, even if they couldn't compare to the more powerful police, they weren't something that ordinary police could compare to. There were 10 such characters, and they were challenging in the form of a group battle. Even the police with the initiator wouldn't dare to casually challenge them. Moreover, if one chose this battlefield, they would suffer from the concentrated fire of all assault rifles from all directions. So, until now, no one has been able to clear this battlefield. Hey, Muri, Noah just wanted to test the performance of the gun. You threw him into this battlefield, isn't it too much? Rintaro suspiciously looked at Muri. If you let Noah be easily defeated, your product may disappoint the customers and make them give up on buying it. Is that okay? I'll see you in the small room. You don't understand, do you? Muri stared at the screen in front of her and leisurely waved the fan in her hand. Just like when I first met you, my intuition told me that the man in front of me may not be simple. Hearing this sentence, Rintaro suddenly stopped talking. Muri suddenly smiled meaningfully. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to what kind of surprise the president of Fairy Tale can bring me. Moreover, it's a gun specially modified by our company. However, just as this sentence came out of Muri's mouth, the scene on the screen in front of her made her face stiffen. Not only Muri, but even Rintaro also widened his eyes. Because, on the screen, Noah didn't even take a shooting posture. He kept holding the gun, pointing the muzzle at the ground, and closed his eyes. Noah closed his eyes. Stupid. Is he an idiot? Even Muri and Rintaro couldn't help but call out like this. This was a battlefield where they would suffer from the concentrated fire of rifles from all directions. Closing his eyes? Isn't this courting death? However, the next scene that appeared in front of the two people in front of the screen caused their mouths to slowly open at the same time. Bang 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 bang. Almost at the same time when Noah closed his eyes, chaotic gunshots from all directions randomly sounded. Shio 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 shio. The sound of dense bullets piercing the air echoed in the surroundings, mixed with the chaotic gunshot sounds of the battlefield. Noah raised his head and moved his hand that was holding the gun. Dang 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 dang. Noah's hand that was holding the spear seemed to have turned into a dancing afterimage in an instant. The rest of his body remained motionless, but his hand that was holding the spear began to dance wildly. While leaving behind afterimages, intense sparks and violent clashing sounds were heard in the trajectory of the afterimages that were waving past. It was the sound and phenomenon caused by Noah blocking the rifle bullets that were fired from all directions with the body of the gun in his hand. What? Muri and Rintaro's pupils suddenly shrank to the size of a needle tip. Using a gun body with a blocking area of less than 50 square centimeters to block hundreds of rifle bullets coming from all directions at the same time? Still closing his eyes? Is this something that a human can do? Bang 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 bang. Dang 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 dang. Unaware of Muri and Rentaro's shock at this time, Noah blindly waved his hand holding the gun, blocking all the incoming bullets without missing a single one. After a minute of concentrated fire, it began to stop. Until then, Noah's hand holding the gun tightened. Without warning, he aimed the gun in his hand in one direction and pulled the trigger. Bang! The bullet that was comparable to an anti-tank sniper rifle's shot, the power that could penetrate an armored vehicle quickly cut through the air, hitting the head of a soldier who had just emerged from the sand dune. Bang! The powerful bullet directly shot the soldier's head, making the soldier's body slowly fall down. Bang 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 bang. In this regard, Noah didn't even look at them. His eyes were still closed tightly as he spun his body. When the muzzle of the gun reached 5 directions along with the rotation of his body, the remaining 5 bullets in the gun in his hand were all fired. Bang 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 bang. As if to coordinate with Noah's shooting, the 5 soldiers in the 5 directions all poked their heads out. Just as they were about to launch a new round of shooting, their heads were suddenly blown apart by the bullets that came out of nowhere. But when the bullets in the revolver in his hand were all used up, Noah fiercely patted his waist. The prepared bullets flew out from Noah's waist magazine. The 6 bullets were immediately thrown high into the sky, then fell down again. At this moment, Noah also swung his hand that was holding the revolver. The revolving magazine of the modified revolver in his hand suddenly popped out. The empty shells of 6 bullets suddenly shook out and fell to the ground. Immediately, Noah raised the gun in his hand high, and the 6 bullets that were thrown down fell into the 6 grooves in the revolver's magazine very accurately as if they had been calculated. The next moment, Noah swung his hand again, the loaded magazine ejected back into the gun. At this time, the bullets were loaded. If the entire process was calculated using a timer that was accurate to the decimal point, it would only take 0.7 seconds. Looking at Noah, who closed his eyes and continued to shoot, accurately hitting each soldier's head, exploding the simulated soldier's head, and accurately blocking the shots from all directions, Muri and Rintaro almost doubted their own eyes. So strong. Rintaro couldn't find any other adjectives to describe his mood at this time. What is this? What is this? Muri was like a warmonger who saw an exciting battle and was so excited that she couldn't tell north from south. Is there a man like this in this world? Although the modified revolver provided by MOWeave has enough bullet speed and power to match the anti-tank sniper rifle that can penetrate armored vehicles, it has the shortcomings of too small a bullet capacity, too much weight, and too large a recoil. Therefore, the person who used this gun must have extraordinary arm strength. Seeing that Noah could shoot continuously in a short period of time, and his hand didn't even tremble, Muri and Rintaro knew that Noah's arm strength passed. Looking at Noah's godlike skill in reloading bullets, which only took 0.7 seconds, the shortcoming of having a small capacity was made up for. In this way, the gun was simply tailor-made for Noah. So suitable. Bang. As the last bullet was fired, the last soldier fell in the desert. When she came back to her senses, Noah had already returned to his original room. So strong. 21,000%. Mori's excited scream rang out, causing Noah to press down on his ears. What 21,000%? That's the average of Kuriki's combat power from the previous 3 times he used this simulation facility. After setting it to 100%, the current combat power is calculated. In other words, you're 210 times stronger than Kuriki. 210 times stronger than Rintaro in his normal state? Noah clenched the gun in his hand and nodded with satisfaction. Morrison, I want this. Chapter 93. Is there really no problem? Walking on the busy street, Noah touched the gun and the magazine full of ammunition that were hidden under his coat at the back of his waist. He could not help but let out a sound. No matter if it's a specially modified gun or a manufactured ammunition, the cost is not cheap, right? Is it really okay to provide it for free? Since they said it's free, why don't you accept it generously? Rotaru, who was walking beside Noah, had an indifferent look on his face. Even a person like me is willing to be a sponsor. You're a person who showed 210 times more fighting power than me, and you only used shooting and closed your eyes. You didn't show any close combat ability that even Yenju was no match for. Otherwise, you would be at least 500 times more powerful than me. If that shrewd president's daughter let go of a living signboard like you, then she wouldn't be Sima Muri. It seemed like the police were the only ones benefiting from the weapons company as the sponsor, but of course, that was impossible. As a sponsor, the weapons company could use the slogan, "A strong police team is using the weapons provided by us," to gain publicity and improve their business. Therefore, it was impossible for the weapons company to provide equipment to just anyone. If you want the weapons company to become a sponsor, You have to go through a strict review. A year ago, the Tiantong Civilian Guard Company was still in its infancy stage and did not have any actual achievements. Originally, they were mentally prepared to be rejected during the review stage, so they applied to SEMA Heavy Industries, but the result was unexpectedly approved. As for the reason, Noah didn't know, but he could only smile bitterly at Ryutaru's words. If Noah showed his close combat ability, he would definitely be stronger. This was not wrong. But what Ryutaru didn't know was that Noah made a big mistake in shooting. Ryutaru thought that it was incredible that Noah could shoot with 100% accuracy with his eyes closed, but only Noah knew that it wasn't incredible at all. On the contrary, if he didn't do that, Noah might not even be able to hit a target. That's not surprising. It had been a year since he came to this world. It was not the first time that Noah had seen a gun. But before today, Noah had never even touched a gun. How could he hit every shot? Therefore, in order to not miss the target, Noah could only close his eyes and use his sensing ability wholeheartedly. Using his outstanding sensing ability, he took in the surroundings, the opponent's position, movements, and intentions in all directions. Everything was included in the scope of his detection, and he shot like a radar. Therefore, Noah was able to achieve a 100% hit rate. In other words, Noah's shooting ability was so outstanding only because of his outstanding perception ability. If he were to rely on his own ability to shoot, he might not even be able to hit a single target. In the simulation battle, in the end, only Noah's godlike ability to reload and block the incoming attacks was what Mo and Ryutaru saw. He was the real deal. As for his shooting ability, without his perception ability, it might be a bit too much to say that Noah was trash. But compared to those who have been specially trained in shooting, Noah was indeed a bit worse, let alone hitting every single target. Ryutaro, who didn't know any of this, was very emotional. Mo treated Noah like a treasure and repeatedly said that she would give him weapons and ammo for free. If he needed other weapons in the future, she would also provide them for free. Just like Ryutaro said, she treated Noah like a living signboard. Just as Noah was thinking about this, Ryutaru suddenly said, "Actually, I've always wanted to ask you, why did you approve of me as Yenju's promoter?" Ryutaru's listless expression slowly became serious. He looked forward and said, "Undoubtedly, you are very strong, and you personally taught Yenju combat skills. As an initiator, Yenju's ability is much stronger than the average initiator. Even you said that she can squeeze into the top 300 IP rankings. With such a strong initiator, why didn't you partner with Yenju yourself? You don't have an initiator either, right?" Noah's footsteps imperceptibly paused for a moment, but after a moment, he recovered as if nothing had happened. After a moment of silence, he opened his mouth. "I'm not afraid to tell you the truth. When I first saw you, not only did I not want Yenju to be your initiator, I also wanted to kick you out of Fairy Tail." Ryutaru was stunned. Obviously, Ryutaru had thought of many answers, but he didn't expect Noah's answer to be like this. "Ryutaru," Noah said indifferently. "You are from the plundered generation, right?" Ryutaru's body trembled, and his eyes began to fluctuate. "I still remember a year ago when I received your application to become an initiator in Fairy Tail and met you, your reaction." Noah was still looking forward as he spoke. "At that time, when you mentioned the initiator, there was not the slightest bit of emotion in your eyes. When you looked at the appearance of the cursed child in Fairy Tail, it was as if you were looking at an animal that only knew how to walk. If I'm not wrong, at that time, you were the same as everyone else. You hated and excluded the cursed child, right?" Ryutaru didn't refute and tacitly agreed. "I'm sure you know very well why I established Fairy Tail. I want those children to live a normal life." Noah's tone was surprisingly firm. "Even for those children who were determined to fight and become initiators, I also hoped that they would be able to obtain a partner who cherished them. If they couldn't do that, I would have rejected them without hesitation." "Then why did you still choose the me at that time?" Ryutaru finally couldn't help but ask. "At that time, I didn't have the qualifications to be acknowledged by you, did I?" Hearing Ryutaru's words, Noah closed his eyes and smiled. Do you know what kind of feelings Yenju had for other people in the past, other than me and my fellow fairy tale companions who took her in? What kind of feelings did she have for others? Ryutaru's footsteps stopped. Do you still remember Yenju, who hates everyone except me and my fellow cursed children? Do you still remember the change in you when you saw her? Noah also stopped in his tracks, and his tone was a little distant. When you saw Yenju's eyes filled with hatred, Ryutaru, your emotionless gaze changed, and it became filled with shock. This was a change that the other plundered generations would never have. So, I decided to give you all a chance. I'll give Yenju, who had always hated others, a chance to come into contact with outsiders and change her hatred for outsiders. I'll also give you a chance to get to know these children again, and truly free you from the plundered generations and become a normal person. Noah raised his head and looked at Ryutaru, and the corner of his mouth curved upwards. As it turns out, my eyesight wasn't bad. You all successfully bid farewell to the hatred in your hearts. Phew! Ryutaru let out a heavy sigh and bitterly laughed. It seems that I still have to thank you. You're welcome, Noah said jokingly. Ding-ling-ling. Suddenly, Noah and Ryutaru's phones rang at the same time, causing their gazes to change at the same time. Chapter 94. In the cold corridor, Noah and Rintaro seemed to be walking leisurely, but in reality, their footsteps were somewhat hurried. Their footsteps could be clearly heard as they hurried forward. President Noah. See you inside. In front of them, next to a door, Mugging, who was wearing a black sailor suit, seemed to be waiting for the two's arrival. When she saw Noah and Rintaro appear, a relieved expression appeared on her face. Mugen-san. Rintaro hurriedly stepped forward. What's going on? Why did you suddenly ask me to come to the Ministry of Defense? This happens to be something I want to know. I just received news that there's a commission. Mugging reached out her hand and gestured for Rintaro to not be anxious. Then, she cast her gaze on Noah. Now, it seems that it's not just the Tendo Civilian Police Company that received the news. Even Fairy Tale received the news? Noah didn't answer and only nodded. After sizing up Mugen's surroundings, he asked, What about you? Where's Yenju? She's in Fairy Tale. I told her to continue with her classes. Mugging sighed. After all, since I was asked to come to the Ministry of Defense, the topic I'm going to talk about will definitely make Yenju sleepy, right? Noah smiled bitterly, but he didn't say anything. He walked past Mugging and came to the side of the door and pushed it open. What appeared in front of Noah, Mugging, and Rintaro was a conference room with a slender oval table in the center. A huge EL screen was embedded in the innermost wall. The moment Noah opened the door, a suffocating atmosphere appeared in the conference room. Mugging and Rintaro's shoulders stiffened. Even Noah frowned. The culprit behind this suffocating atmosphere was the many people in the conference room. There were people in well-made suits sitting at the conference table in the center of the room. One could tell at a glance that they were high-ranking people, but they didn't look like they had suffered a lot. There was a sign on the table in front of them, indicating the identities of the representatives of these police companies. Around these people, there was a group of people who were obviously dressed differently from the presidents of the police companies. Not only were they not uniform, but they were also dressed in all kinds of strange things. They were all holding black metal weapons in their hands, and they were all leaning against the wall. They more or less gave off a murderous aura. There was no doubt that they were the police officers under the presidents of the police companies sitting at the conference table. They were also promoters, like Rintaro. It could be seen that there were little girls around Yenju's age, about 10 years old, standing beside each of the police officers. It was clear that these young girls were the initiators of the police. What's going on? Ryutaro subconsciously lowered his voice. Why are there so many police officers? Why did the president of the company bring the internal police officers with him? Moreover, almost all of them are famous police companies in Tokyo. Mugging looked a little nervous. It seems that something big is going to happen. In this regard, Noah didn't comment much, but he directly opened the door and walked in. With Noah taking the lead, Mugging and Rintaro seemed to have mustered up a lot of courage and followed Noah into the conference room. Just as the three of them stepped into the conference room, from all directions, a murderous gaze pierced the three of them like arrows. Hey, is this a joke? Without giving Noah, Mugging, and Rintaro a chance to react, among the group of police officers leaning against the wall, the promoter deliberately shouted and walked out. It was a burly man wearing a vest. He had a face scarf with a skull pattern on his mouth, and he carried a large sword that weighed at least 10 kilograms on his back. He gave off the aura of a delinquent and a troublemaker. What's wrong with the police recently? You've even started to treat this as a game? The ruffian-like man looked down at Noah and the other two with his burly figure. There's no place for little brats to stay here. Hurry up and get out of here. Mugging and Rintaro, who didn't expect trouble to come as soon as they arrived, froze for a moment and forgot to react. Only Noah didn't seem to be surprised. He didn't even look at the thuggish man. He walked past him and walked towards the conference table. Careful! A sharp sound pierced through the air, and Mugging and Rintaro's screams sounded at the same time Noah walked past the thuggish man. Immediately after, the thuggish man's angry roar sounded. I'm talking to you, didn't you hear me? Little brat. With such an angry roar, under the watchful eyes of the surrounding people, the ruffian's fist mercilessly landed on Noah's back with a strong gust of wind. Noah was caught off guard by the attack. Bang! However, in the next second, the person who flew out with a muffled sound wasn't Noah, but the burly thuggish man who was at least 80 kilograms. Bang! His huge body smashed into the wall of the conference room, causing the wall to crack like a spider web. Bah! The thuggish man who was embedded in the wall screamed in pain while holding his arm that had just been punched. Taking a closer look, the thuggish man's arm was twisted at a slightly unnatural angle in a direction that an ordinary person's arm wouldn't be able to reach. Director Jiang. At the conference table, the president of a police company in a suit stood up abruptly, his eyes wide open as he looked at the thuggish man who was holding his arm and screaming. His eyes were full of shock. The rest of the people present, whether it was the president of the police company or the police officers who were partners, all focused their eyes on Noah, who was standing in the same place without moving at all. Their foreheads were dripping with cold sweat. It was only at this moment that Noah raised his head and glanced in the direction of the screaming Director General. What's wrong with the police recently? Even a guy who only has strength and muscles, without a brain or eyes, can get in? The whole room was silent. You bastard! No, it wasn't that no one was silent. Director Jiang held his seemingly broken arm and struggled to stand up. His eyes full of anger and murderous intent stared at Noah. Kill you. Absolutely kill you. Almost no one doubted Director Jiang's words, including Noah. Among the more than 700,000 police officers in the world, there were people who followed their own principles and had good fighting instincts. However, there were also people who wanted to find a place to behave atrociously and criminals who wanted to find an identity to hide their crimes. Among them, there were also many thugs. Noah was aware of this, so he didn't hold back. Not to mention, Director Jiang was looking for trouble. Director Jiang wanted to rush out, but he was stopped by a young girl. Mr. Director Jiang, please calm down. The young girl who stood in front of Director Jiang and stopped him was wearing a simple long-sleeve dress and tight pants. She had a pair of big, bright eyes, but she gave people a cold feeling. Are you trying to stop me? Xiaoshe. Director Jiang's eyes were filled with hostility. Don't forget your identity. Mr. Director Jiang, please calm down first. The little girl named Xiaoshe, who looked like the initiator of the Directorate of Generals, unexpectedly said these words calmly. He is the president of Fairy Tale Noah Doria. Director Jiang's expression suddenly froze. Chapter 95. Fairy Tale? Around them, all the police company presidents and police partners were stunned for a moment, and then they started to make noise. He is the president of Fairy Tale? That famous shelter of the cursed child? No wonder, now, in the Tokyo area, there was almost no one who didn't know about the existence of the fairy tale. The reason was very simple because Fairy Tale was the shelter of the cursed child, who everyone saw as a rat crossing the street. In this era where more than 90% of the people hated the cursed child and rejected the cursed child, even if other people did not look at the cursed child with biased eyes, they would definitely not want to provide any shelter for them. However, Fairy Tale had appeared, and in a short span of a year, it had made a name for itself, becoming an extremely famous existence in the Tokyo area. How could such an existence not attract people's attention? Moreover, in the industry, there was a rumor that the initiator that came out of Fairy Tale had a higher fighting power than the average initiator. Many of the promoters that were recognized by Fairy Tale and partners with the initiator of Fairy Tale were also very famous, and almost all of them joined Fairy Tale as police officers. In addition, Fairy Tale also turned all the requests from the public into commission forms, allowing the internal police officers to choose from them. They did not hire these police officers based on their salary, but instead shared the profits with each other. This method of operation attracted many foreign police officers, and Fairy Tale became more and more famous at the same time. Therefore, people who did not know about Fairy Tale did not exist in the Tokyo area. Of course, there was a more direct way to express how famous Fairy Tale was. For example, in Fairy Tale, there were at least 10 police officers whose IP was ranked around the top 1,000. And Supervisor Zhang's IP was ranked 1584. In Fairy Tale, there were many police officers who were ranked higher than the general supervisor. Not to mention, in Fairy Tale, there were piles and piles of cursed child that were qualified to be initiators. Even if Supervisor Jiang wanted to find trouble with Noah, he was not qualified at all. This was what Xiaoshi wanted to express. Supervisor Jiang finally calmed down slowly. Gritting his teeth, he fiercely twisted his broken arm back to its original position. "Consider me unlucky." Leaving this sentence, Supervisor Jiang gritted his teeth and returned to the crowd. In the surroundings, all the police officers and company presidents cast all kinds of gazes at Noah. Most of them were examining him, as if they wanted to get to know the rumored president of Fairy Tale again. In contrast to these people, the children who were initiators all cast curious and obviously favorable gazes at Noah. They seemed to have a very good impression of Noah. That should be because Noah not only did not reject the cursed child, but also provided a place for them to stay. Because of this, naturally, there would not be any cursed child who would hate Noah. Xiaoshi also bowed to Noah, causing a smile to appear on Noah's face. He reached out his hand, and while she was still in a daze, he patted her head. Then he walked to the side of the conference table and sat down at the seat with the Fairy Tale nameplate. Only then did the young girl named Xiaoshi come back to her senses. She bowed to Noah again, and then returned to Supervisor Zhang's side. However, her gaze was fixed on Noah, and she did not look away. In fact, the rest of the initiators were the same. Phew! Only then did Mug-Ino sit down beside Noah. With Rentaro standing behind him, both of them heaved a huge sigh of relief. "You almost scared us to death just now. It's not like you don't know the character of some police officers," Noah said as if nothing had happened. "So, when it's time to act, you should act. Otherwise, they will only look down on you. If it's possible, I also want to act." Rentaro could not help but complain. "It's a pity that the opponent is too strong. That's someone who is ranked in the top 1,000. If I act, won't I be killed in an instant?" Noah did not agree, nor did he deny it. Instead, after a pause, he looked at the door. At the same time, a person wearing a uniform, who seemed to be a high-ranking official, walked into the room. Everyone in the room immediately suppressed the distracting thoughts in their hearts, and focused their attention on the person who came in. The person looked around at everyone in the room, then nodded. "Today, I've called the presidents and police officers of all police companies here for no other reason than to entrust a task to you." At this point, the person's expression began to become serious. "However, before I explain the content of this task, I'd like to tell everyone that those who wish to reject this task, please do so now. After everyone has heard the task, this task cannot be rejected anymore. Hearing this, many of the presidents of police companies frowned. Even Mugino and Rintaro exchanged glances. What was the difference between this and a compulsory task? However, no one in the room stood up and expressed their rejection. Most of the people present were famous police companies, so naturally, they would not give up before hearing the task. That would only weaken their company's reputation. The uniformed high-ranking official seemed to have expected this. Just as he was about to nod, a voice rang out. "This doesn't seem appropriate, does it?" Everyone was stunned, and when they saw who had spoken, they were even more stunned. The person who had spoken was Noah. "I believe that everyone in the industry is clear about the rules of fairy tale. We will make the task into a list of tasks and post it internally, allowing the internal members to choose." Noah looked at the high-ranking official indifferently. Since this commission cannot be rejected, it means that either the content of the commission is confidential or the difficulty is too great. The former does not allow me to directly announce the commission to everyone in the inner circle, and the latter may lead to the awkward situation of no one accepting the commission. No matter how I look at it, this is not a commission that is suitable to be called fairy tale, right? The high-ranking official was suddenly speechless. "Looking at you, you don't seem to have considered this?" Noah narrowed his eyes. "Can I assume that you didn't even consider this problem and just casually dragged fairy tale into this? This is a task from the government." The high-ranking official frowned. Could it be that fairy tale wants to reject it? The government? Noah smiled, but there was no smile in his eyes. "Unfortunately, we are a non-governmental organization." After saying this, Noah stood up, and without giving any room for conversation, he walked straight out of the door. At this moment, the huge EL screen inlaid on the innermost wall of the conference room suddenly lit up. "President Noah, please wait." Chapter 96. President Noah, please wait. When the quiet voice that no one in the Tokyo area would find unfamiliar came from the display screen that suddenly lit up, and when the image on the display screen was printed in the eyes of everyone present fiercely opened their eyes. Almost in the next second, all the presidents of the police companies sitting at the conference table suddenly stood up in a panic. Noah's face also showed a look of surprise. Looking at the picture played on the display screen, his eyes were full of surprise. What appeared on the display screen was a very beautiful girl with silver hair, dressed in pure white clothes, covered with a layer of snow. It was the ruler of the Tokyo area, Holy Son of Heaven. Behind Holy Son of Heaven, Tendo Kikuchi followed like a shadow. His eyes met with Noah's eyes for the first time, and when they intertwined, it was as if sparks burst out, making the surrounding temperature seem to drop a lot. "Everyone, please don't be too cautious." In the snow-white holy residence, Holy Son of Heaven, who was sitting on a pure white chair, said in a gentle tone, "This time, I am just your client. If you can listen to me carefully, I will be very grateful." Hearing the words of Holy Son of Heaven, everyone's expression relaxed a little, but no one sat down. Everyone paid the most basic respect to the girl in front of them, whether in name or in the real sense, the ruler of the Tokyo area. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Noah." Holy Son of Heaven cast his eyes on Noah, nodded slightly, and expressed his apology. As Mr. Noah said, "This time it is our fault. We didn't consider the situation of fairy tale, and we invited fairy tale without permission and added such a request. It is a bit rude to fairy tale, but we also ask Mr. Noah to be considerate." As Holy Son of Heaven's words came out, the rest of the people present once again shifted their gazes, converging on Noah. Holy Son of Heaven has taken the initiative to give a way out. This sharp and in the limelight, the president of fairy tale, in the end, will give face to Holy Son of Heaven? Or make things awkward to the point of ending things? Thinking of this, the people present couldn't help but want to see the mind and temperament of this unusually young famous person. Fortunately, he didn't let them down. Noah really didn't think that he was a character, an arrogant young man who didn't want to let go after getting something on him. I only hope that Holy Son of Heaven can carefully consider whether to let Fairy Tale participate in this mission. Noah's eyes moved back from Tendo Kikuchi and moved to Holy Son of Heaven. If you really want to let Fairy Tale participate in it, then I hope that Holy Son of Heaven can consider a way that can satisfy both sides. Hearing this, many people present secretly changed their view of Noah. Not only could he see the situation clearly, not blindly pursue it, and not be afraid of power, not to be outdone, and talk to the ruler of the Yodo region like this. The average young man certainly couldn't do this. Therefore, if everyone just had a little understanding of the strength of Noah who defeated the admiral with one blow, then now they had some understanding of Noah's temperament and means. I understand. Holy Son of Heaven nodded after pondering for a while. I will start to explain the content of the mission now, and for this mission, the problem of how Fairy Tale should cooperate. Later, I hope that Mr. Noah can come to the holy residence, and we will discuss the countermeasures again. How about it? Come to the holy residence? Noah raised his eyebrows and looked at Tendo Kikuchi with a faint smile. This shouldn't be the idea of this Tendo Kikuchi, right? Holy Son of Heaven was speechless. Not only Holy Son of Heaven, but even the rest of the people who heard Noah's tone and Tendo Kikuchi's were stunned. Only Mugging in the corner looked at Noah in a daze, somewhat thoughtful. At this moment when the rest of the people were silent, Tendo Kikuchi looked deeply at Noah, opened his mouth, and said something that made everyone even more stunned. President Noah, I admit that there is a bit of a grudge between us, but you should understand that I will not involve the grudge in official business. Hearing this, everyone looked at each other. Grudge? There is a grudge between these two? Noah tilted his head without saying anything, turned around, and returned to his seat again. Then, let's start to explain the mission now. Holy Son of Heaven's expression unnoticeably relaxed, then returned to his usual state. This mission is actually very simple. I hope that everyone can eliminate a protozoa that has sneaked into the Tokyo area, and retrieve a box like this from the protozoa's body. After saying that, a window appeared on the screen showing Holy Son of Heaven, showing a lead-silver suitcase that was specially marked with the words, Mission Target, and beside it was a number. That was the reward for completing the mission. The box itself looked extremely ordinary, and there was nothing out of the ordinary about it. However, the value of the reward indicated at the side caused the surrounding atmosphere to be filled with confusion. Of course, it wasn't because the reward was too low. On the contrary, the reward for completing the mission was too high. It was so high that it was completely unbelievable that this was the reward for eliminating a protozoa and retrieving an ordinary box. In an instant, the scene entered a state of absolute silence. Other than the police officers who were usually accompanied by Death, the rest of the people present were all the presidents of the police force companies. To be able to get to this position, even if they weren't very smart, they were people who could keenly sense that something was wrong at certain important moments. And this time, there was obviously something wrong with the commission. In this regard, Holy Son of Heaven seemed to have no intention of explaining further. He closed his eyes and said to himself, "If there is no problem, please start working on this matter now." Suddenly, Mugging hurriedly raised her hand, and just as she was about to ask something, Noah suddenly pressed on her shoulder. Mugging looked at Noah with some surprise. "What's wrong?" Noah didn't speak, but stared closely at a certain position at the conference table in front of him, leading everyone's gaze in that direction. The next moment, next to the position Noah was staring at, the two presidents of the police force companies let out a cry of surprise and retreated to both sides. "Oh!" At the same time, in the same position, such a voice sounded. I thought at least until I made a sound to alert someone, but I didn't expect there to be someone with such keen senses. How interesting. The speaker was a tall man. He was at least 190 centimeters tall. His limbs and body were very slender. He wore a wine-red tuxedo with fine stripes, a tall hat on his head, and a clown-like mask on his face. His outfit was very strange. Such a strange person put his feet on the conference table and sat in a position that was just empty, which made the people around him very shocked. What about the other one?" Without giving the people around him time to be shocked, Noah said in an indifferent tone, "Let her come out too. You even noticed this?" The man let out a sharp, strange laugh and stood up. "In that case, little Benet, you come out and say hello to everyone." As soon as the voice fell, a small figure suddenly fell from the ceiling and appeared on the conference table. Chapter 97. Swish! Everyone in the room finally calmed down a little. They took out their guns and aimed at the two people standing at the conference table, their eyes fixed on them. A man in a tuxedo who looked like he was going to a costume party didn't seem to notice the actions of the people around him. He took off his hat and bowed deeply to the screen that showed the image of the Holy Son of Heaven. "Let me introduce myself. My surname is Leech, full name is Li Qingyin." After that, the man named Li Qingyin put his hand on the girl next to him. The girl had short wavy hair and wore a dress with trimmings. There were 2 scabbards on her back. From the shape and length, it should be 2 scabbards for Kodachi. "This is my initiator. She is also my daughter. My name is Leech Benet. I'm 10 years old this year." The young girl used an extremely naive tone and expression to say these words. However, the words that she said next caused the hearts of many people present to turn cold. "Hey, Dad, they are all pointing their guns at us. Can I cut them?" When she said this, Leech Benet's small body released an extremely strong murderous aura that seemed to want to prove the authenticity of her words. The strong murderous aura told everyone present that the initiator in front of them was not only unusual, but also had killed many people. Noah furrowed his brows tightly as he looked at Benet Leech Jr. with a serious expression. "You have killed people?" Leech Benet blinked and looked at Noah. His eyes were suddenly dyed crimson. It was the symbol of the cursed child who released the power in his body. Leech Benet, who directly released his power, had an innocent and evil expression. He looked at Noah and said this. "Do you also want to be killed by me?" Hearing this, Noah understood. The child in front of him already took killing people as a matter of course. No matter what, it was impossible to save this child and let this child live the life of an ordinary person. This made Noah, who had always wanted the cursed children to live a happy life like ordinary people and created fairy tale, couldn't help but feel sad. His gaze that was fixed on Benet the leech also turned into pity and sympathy. Leech Benet wrinkled his little nose and looked at Li Qingyin. "Dad, the way this person looks at me makes me very uncomfortable. It's fine if I don't kill others, but I will only kill him. Is that okay?" "Oh." Li Qingyin glanced at Noah, pondered for a moment, and then spoke. "Since he made my cute daughter feel uncomfortable, then let's kill him." Leech little Benet immediately smiled happily. "Don't you?" Ryutaru, who had been silently holding his gun, couldn't help but yell. Without hesitation he pulled the trigger of his gun. Using this as a signal, all the gunmen on the scene pulled the trigger one after another. Bang, 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 bang. Endless gunshots and smoke filled the air. Bullets from all directions pierced through the air and shot towards Li Qingyin's body. However, the scene that appeared in the next moment caused everyone to reveal an expression of disbelief and shock. Dang, ding, ding, ding. What? No one dared to believe their eyes. However, this was indeed happening in reality. Seiko, Magino, Rentaro and the others' expressions all changed. The surrounding people also stopped shooting in a daze. Even Noah's gaze wavered for a moment, then gradually condensed. It was like a scene from a story. Li Qingyin had his hands behind his back, and bullets stopped in the air around him. This caused a voice to appear in the crowd. "How is this possible? Of course it's possible." Li Qingyin exaggeratedly spread his hands as if he was acting. "Please allow me to continue my unfinished self-introduction. I am the former Ground Self-Defense Forces Eastern Division's 787th Mechanized Special Unit. New Human Creation Project, Li Qingyin." New Human Creation Project? Gasps could be heard echoing in the air. New Human Creation Project? Noah repeated with a face full of confusion. What was that? Although Noah did not know what it was, he temporarily suppressed the doubts in his heart and turned to look at Mugging and Rentaro beside him. Therefore, Noah saw it clearly. For a moment, Rentaro's expression was completely stiff, and his eyes trembled violently. Mugino was also taken aback, and then glanced at Rentaro. Just as Noah was feeling puzzled, a figure shot in his direction like a bullet fired from a gun. Noah's eyes suddenly turned cold. Clang. A crisp sound of collision resounded. A surprised voice rang out. Leech Ingyin, who was standing at the conference table, could not help but let out a surprised voice. He actually blocked Benet Jr.'s attack? Benet Jr., who was originally standing next to Leech Ingyin, had unknowingly appeared in front of Noah. She jumped up, and the two kodachi at her waist were tightly held in her hands, and she slashed towards Noah's direction. However, Benet Jr.'s two kodachi were blocked by Noah. It was a large modified black revolver with an extremely domineering and gorgeous design. Screech! The kodachi and the revolver violently rubbed against each other, causing countless sparks to fly. Benet Jr. kept using her strength, but she was still unable to break through Noah's defense, which made her very surprised. Immediately, Benet Leech decisively retreated, returning to Leech Ingyin's side. For the first time, his deep red eyes stared at Noah with an extremely serious expression. "For you." Hearing this, Noah looked straight at Benet Jr. "Then let me introduce myself. I am the president of Fairy Tale, Noah Dole." Fairy Tale? Benet the Leech was slightly startled. Fairy Tale? Leech Ingyin suddenly looked at Noah. "So that's how it is. You're the famous cursed child shelter? Cut the crap." Perhaps because of Benet Jr., Noah's tone was different from before, and it was full of impatience. "You're in the limelight here. Don't tell me you're actually planning to perform?" Oh. Leech Ingyin was startled awake. "I almost forgot about the important matter." Saying this, Leech Ingyin turned her head and looked at Elysian Son of Heaven, laughing out loud. "I actually only came here for one purpose, and that is to tell the head of state that as a former police officer, I can also accept the head of state's request. How about it?" Elysian Son of Heaven did not speak. He only stared at Leech Ingyin, causing Leech Ingyin to laugh even more happily and sharply. "Of course, that thing, if we're lucky enough to get it first, please allow me to use it for a short period of time." Hearing this, Elysian Son of Heaven seemed to give up and closed his eyes. "What are you talking about?" Mugging stepped forward and asked. "What's in the box?" "It's not my job to explain things to the client." Leech Ingyin pressed on his hat and looked at Noah. "We'll meet again." After saying this, Leech Ingyin and Benet Jr. jumped up at the same time, broke the glass of the meeting room's window, jumped out, and disappeared from the bottom of the building. Noah looked around at the people who were at a loss and slowly narrowed his eyes. Chapter 98. Tokyo District 1, Holy Residence. Pushing open the luxurious door in front of him, Noah walked into the hall of the Holy Residence that he had visited not long ago. "I didn't expect to meet you so soon." Just like the last time they met, Xing Tianzi, who was sitting on the sofa with an elegant posture, opened his eyes and looked forward. "President Noah, please take a seat." Noah looked at Holy Sun, who didn't seem to have changed since their last meeting. He didn't carry a magic sword pouch this time. He first looked around Holy Sun, then sat on the sofa in front of him. "That old guy isn't with you?" "This is my idea," Elysian Son of Heaven emphasized. "After all, when the two of you meet, the atmosphere will not be good." "It's just not good," Noah said faintly. "You should know that unless he lets go of his inner thoughts, we will have to face each other head-on one day." The Holy Child's expression became unnatural after hearing Noah's straightforward explanation of his relationship with the Celestial Child. If it was someone else with the same status as Noah saying this, Holy Sun definitely wouldn't have reacted this way. After all, the difference in status between Noah and the Celestial Child's Chrysanthemum Prime was obvious. On one side, he was just an ordinary police officer who founded a civilian organization. On the other side, he was the person with the highest authority in the entire district. Once the two of them fought, no matter how one looked at it, no one felt that the former had a chance of winning. However, Noah, in such a terrible situation, not only did he neutralize all of the methods that Chrysanthemum Celestial Child had secretly used against him in this year, but he was also evenly matched with Chrysanthemum Celestial Child. Furthermore, he even made Fairy Tale bigger and bigger. As the person whom the Celestial Child Chrysanthemum Prime was assisting, the Sage Son of Heaven had seen the Celestial Child Chrysanthemum Prime, who always had a calm expression even if the sky fell, furrowing his brows when others mentioned Noah and Fairy Tale. It was a very troublesome expression. Thus, he knew that if Noah really wanted to do this, he would be able to deal a heavy blow to the Celestial Chrysanthemum Prime. It should be said that if it wasn't for the fairy's tale, the lone Noah might have already dealt with the Celestial Chrysanthemum Prime. Holy Son was secretly shocked when he realized that he had such a high opinion of Noah. He quickly took a deep breath, suppressed the distracting thoughts in his mind, and casually changed the topic. Mr. Noah, this time, I want to talk to you about the request and the leech shadow. Before that, you have to answer 2 of my questions. Noah raised his hand and stopped the Elysian child from speaking. His eyes met the Elysian child's beautiful face. First, what is the new human creation plan? Mr. Noah doesn't know. Holy Son was a little surprised. That was the human weapon creation project that humans initiated in the early years to fight against the protozoa. Human weapon? Yes, Holy Son explained. After performing surgeries with extremely low success rates on dying patients, the metal of protogut animals, that is, the mechanical parts made of aluminum, were assembled on the human body. Thus, powerful soldiers were created. Soldiers created specifically to fight against Holy Son? Noah pondered for a moment, then asked, "Why haven't we heard of such an existence now?" "Because that plan has been frozen for a long time," Holy Son reminded him. The mechanical soldiers of the new human creation plan are indeed very powerful. Holy Son below, stage 4, is almost no match for them. However, later on, the cursed child appeared in the eyes of humans. After Holy Son's reminder, Noah also understood. Regardless of whether it was the mechanical soldiers of the new human creation plan or the cursed child, they were individuals that had the power to rival Holy Son. If the two were to be compared, who would win and who would lose? Noah was not sure. However, if he thought about it carefully, with the existence of the cursed child, there was no need for the mechanical soldiers to appear at all. After all, it was obvious that the cost of creating such powerful mechanical soldiers was definitely not small. On the other hand, the cursed child was a special individual that was naturally born from the mother's body without any cost. On one side, it was a mechanical soldier that required a high cost, and the number of mechanical soldiers could not be guaranteed. On the other side, it was children that did not require any cost at all. Since their combat power was comparable to Holy Son, it was obvious which one to choose. When he thought of this, Noah could not help but laugh. His laugh was extremely sarcastic. In the end, the children that are ostracized and hated by humans are fighting to protect humans. The weapons that humans have spent a lot of money to create want to be the enemy of humans. This script is really interesting. Elysian Son of Heaven opened his mouth slightly, but he couldn't say anything. Second question. Noah did not want to beat around the bush anymore. What's in that box? This. Holy Son showed a rare look of hesitation, but after a while, he sighed again. I'm sorry, Mr. Noah. I can't tell you what is in the box clearly. I can only tell you that it is a dangerous item called 7 Stars Legacy. Holy Son's expression gradually became serious and solemn. As for its use, it is able to summon Holy Son Stage V Zodiac Archic animals. Noah couldn't help but raise his head and look at Holy Son of Heaven. After confirming that Holy Son of Heaven wasn't lying, his heart sank. Zodiac. That was the general term for Holy Son's Stage V archaic animals. During the Archaic Animal War, which was the survival battle that almost caused the extinction of humans 10 years ago, there were 11 archaic animals that displayed extremely terrifying power. They were far more powerful than Stage 4 archaic animals, and once, they almost caused the extinction of humans. Humans gave these 11 archaic animals that possessed extraordinary power the names of the 12 signs of the zodiac as their code names. Among them, Cancer was originally empty, Taurus and Virgo had already been eliminated by the first and second IP ranking initiator, leaving only 9 Stage V archaic animals. Noah had only heard of it once. It was said that they had huge bodies that far exceeded Stage 4 archaic animals, hard outer skin that was completely ineffective against normal weapons, molecular-level regeneration ability, and the ability to not be affected by monolith. In other words, if that whatever 7 stars legacy could really summon Stage V Zodiac to Tokyo, then the Stage V archaic animals that was not affected by monolith would definitely bring a devastating disaster to the people of Tokyo. Noah finally understood why he had to pay so much to retrieve a small box. It turned out that it was a dangerous item that could summon a mass extinction disaster. Phew! Noah slowly exhaled and closed his eyes. What do you plan to do? Right now, almost all of the top police officers in Tokyo have already set out to find the archaic animals that hid the box in their bodies. Sheng Tianzi said word by word. In order to find the box faster than the leech Shadow In, Mr. Noah, I hope you can lend me your strength. Following this sentence, in the hall, a heavy feeling that made people unable to breathe filled the air. Under Sheng Tianzi's unwavering gaze, Noah kept silent with his eyes closed until Sheng Tianzi couldn't help but feel anxious. Then he finally opened his mouth. I will let the fairy tale police officers participate in this operation. Sheng Tianzi heaved a sigh of relief. His pure and holy face slowly hung an extremely beautiful smile. Chapter 99. Noah, who was sitting on the sofa, was flipping through a document. Leech Ingyin, originally ranked 134th in IP. Due to excessive killing, his ranking was frozen, and his police license was revoked. Originally a human weapon created under the New Human Creation Project. His internal organs and most of his body were replaced with machinery. He can produce a repulsive force field for defense. In theory, his ability can withstand the attack of protozoa, Stage 4. Even anti-tank rifle shots can be deflected. Based on current speculation, his strength is at least in the top 100 IP ranks of the promoter. Extremely dangerous. Noah silently turned the document in his hand to the next page. Leech Benet Jr., originally ranked 134th in IP, a Mantis-type initiator. Due to excessive killing, his ranking was frozen. Almost invincible in close combat within the range of swords and knives. Even in the initiator, he has a high level of physical ability. Weapon used is a kodachi. Based on current speculation, his strength is at least in the top 100 IP ranks of the initiator. Likes to kill, extremely dangerous. In addition to these, Noah also had all the information about Leech Ingyin and Leech Benet Jr. Before they were still police officers, there were at least 10 pages of densely packed information. This information was what Noah asked Shengzi to help him find when he left the holy residence. Noah still had a lot of information he didn't know about Li Qingyin. Although he promised Shengzi that he would let the fairy's tale police officers participate in the search for the legacy of the 7 stars and the whereabouts of the leech father and daughter, he himself was still in a state of observation. This world was far from as simple as Noah's original world. Not to mention other things, just the dark side of human nature, the intricate structure of the world, the sinister nature of the human heart, and so on, was not something the people in Noah's original world could compare to. After staying here for a year, Noah, who was fully aware of this, wasn't reckless enough to lend his strength just because of the Holy Sun's request. At the very least, Noah wouldn't act on his own accord until he was certain that the leech Shadow In would truly bring disaster to Fairy Tale and why he wanted to summon Stage V to the Tokyo area. He didn't want to be used as a tool to do bad things with good intentions. Therefore, Noah needed to understand what kind of person Li Qingyin was. However, A small head with two ponytails poked out from behind Noah. She opened her big round eyes and looked at the information in Noah's hands in boredom. Ranked 134 in the original IP rankings? Is this little guy really that powerful? Aren't you a little one yourself? A head slightly bigger than the former, but with waist-length straight black hair, poked out from the other side of Noah's back and said thoughtfully. Before the IP ranking was frozen, it was already 134. This Leech Ingyin and Leech Benet Jr. are definitely much stronger than before the ranking was frozen. Who knows, they might really be monsters in the top 100. Do we really want to be enemies with such opponents? Finally, a head with a listless expression appeared, and its tone was a little uneasy. Even if all the top police in Tokyo were dispatched, the odds of winning against such monsters shouldn't be high, right? Listening to the three voices from behind, feeling the warmth of the heads that poked out from his left shoulder, right shoulder, and head, Noah sighed. Why are you still here? Is the Tiantong Civilian Police Company not going to participate in this operation? I'm the president. This was the president of the Tiantong Civilian Police Company, who ran a company with zero income last month and came to ask for help this month. Otherwise, even eating was a problem. How can the president personally go out to work? I'm just the initiator. This was the words of a 10-year-old girl with her head held high as if she was proud of herself. Before Rintaro, the promoter, makes a move, this concubine has to play her part. Otherwise, it will ruin our reputation as the fairy tale. I'm also waiting for the report on the whereabouts of the mission target, okay? Don't make it sound like I'm afraid of death and don't dare to come out, okay? This was the complaint of a police employee who had been bullied. Also, Yenju, you are now my initiator and a member of the Tiantong Civilian Police Company. Even if you want to emphasize your identity, you should emphasize this, right? Why did it become a corruption of the name fairy tale? Even if this concubine has already joined the Sky Tong Civilian Guard Company, this concubine is still a member of fairy tale. Yenju jumped up and down as she yelled out. This concubine's school is here, and this concubine's home is here. This concubine's friends and companions are all here. Even if thou are this concubine's promoter, thou cannot make this concubine leave fairy's tale. I don't mean to make you leave the fairy tale, right? That is what thou meant. Hey, you two, now is the time to talk about something very important. Can you not quarrel? There were three heads less than 20 centimeters away from his head, and they were quarreling. What kind of feeling was that? Anyway, Noah felt that the noisy voices in the fairy tale were much cuter than these three voices. At that moment, Noah could only say something. I know that your company scale is not big, and you don't have a specialized intelligence organization to collect information about the mission. If you want to participate in this mission, you can only wait for news from other places and try to be a step faster. I also promise that the fairy tale intelligence department will immediately inform you if there is any news, so can you please wait obediently and not disturb me? Hearing this, Rintaro immediately shut his mouth, and Mugino's face showed a satisfied and proud expression. Noah clearly saw it, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So, this girl is deliberately making trouble for me to force me to say these words? Speaking of which, President, this mission is the first time that all of our fairy's tale police officers have been mobilized, and you've personally issued the order for them to be mobilized. President, are you not going to personally participate? Yenju said eagerly. If President personally takes action, those two guys definitely won't be able to escape. It's not that I haven't thought of personally looking for them. Noah shook his head and narrowed his eyes. But there is something that I am very concerned about, and I must investigate it clearly first. Something that you are concerned about? Mugino came over and asked curiously. What is it? Noah smiled but did not answer, which made Mugino somewhat dissatisfied. It was unknown what Mugino thought of, but she suddenly asked. When we were in the Ministry of Defense, Tentong Chrysanthemum said that he had a grudge with you. What grudge do you have? On the side, Rintaro and Yenju's gaze also turned to Noah. Let's not talk about the grudge between me and Tentong Chrysanthemum for now. Mugino, I remember that Tentong Chrysanthemum is your grandfather and also Rintaro's stepfather, right? Noah raised his head and looked at Mugino and Rintaro with a meaningful gaze. If I say that I want to kill Tentong Chrysanthemum, what would you do? Rintaro and Yenju were stunned. To Noah's surprise, Mugino's eyes lit up and a fierce expression appeared on her face. I want to too. Chapter 100. Muging's words instantly made the temperature of the scene drop below freezing point. Rintaro and Yenju lowered their heads and remained silent when they saw Mugino's expression that resembled that of a malicious spirit and the hatred in his eyes. Even Noya furrowed his brows. What is going on? What does she mean by, I want to? Mugging wants to kill Tentong Chrysanthemum? But isn't Tentong Chrysanthemum Mugging's grandfather? After thinking about it this way, Noah realized a problem that he didn't have time to think about before. Tentong Mugging. From her surname, it could be seen that Mugging was a member of the famous Tentong clan in Tokyo, led by Tentong Chrysanthemum. Moreover, she was a direct blood relative. As the granddaughter of Tentong Chrysanthemum, who was like the clan leader of the Tentong clan, Mugging should be a spoiled young lady. However, although Mugging did study in a famous aristocratic school, other than that, even in her private life, Mugging lived very frugally. The Tiantong Civilian Guard Company that she ran was even a small company that was not well known. She did not have the slightest image of a rich young lady at all. Moreover, as far as Noah knew, Mugging seemed to have left the Tentong clan for some reason. Even Ryutaru, who was the adopted son of Tentong Chrysanthemum and Mugging's childhood friend, also left the Tentong clan and established his own clan. Obviously, the hatred that Mugging showed now must be related to why Mugging and Ryutaru left the Tentong clan. This made Noah confirm a fact. In other words, Noah looked straight at Mugging and Ryu. If I really have a grudge against Tentong Chrysanthemum and plan to kill him, you won't stop me, right? This. Ryutaru hesitated for a moment, then dropped his shoulders like he gave up and said in a deep voice. I don't know. Compared to the confused Ryutaru, Mugging was much more decisive. Don't say that I won't stop you. If there is anything I can do to deal with the Tentong clan, no matter what it is, I beg you, count me in. Mugging. Yenju was at a loss. Miss Mugging. Rintaro closed his eyes as if he didn't want to see Mugging like this. Looking at Mugino, Ryuro, and Yenju, Noah had a rough idea of what was going on. After pondering for a while, he spoke. Empyrean Chrysanthemum said that I have a grudge with him. Actually, this is wrong. Mugging, Ryuro, and Yenju were all stunned. I don't have any personal grudges with him. If I did, it would be easy to solve. Noah didn't hide anything and explained straightforwardly. It's just that he wants all the cursed children to go to hell, while I want all the cursed children to live a life like heaven. Therefore, he is against all the cursed children, while I want to protect all the cursed children. We just have different standpoints. Hearing this, Mugino, Ryutaro, and Yenju looked at each other and understood what was going on. Guild leader. Yenju stood up and loudly declared her position. I will stand on your side. Seeing Yenju's indignant expression, Noah couldn't help but laugh. Just as he was about to say something, a melodious ringtone sounded in his pocket. Mugging, Ryutaro, and Yenju's faces all tensed up. Noah's movements also paused. Then he calmly took out the phone in his pocket and answered the call. How is it? On the other end of the phone, a voice kept ringing. After a while, it stopped, causing Noah to nod his head. I understand. With that, Noah hung up the phone and his face sank. Seeing this scene, the other three people present had a bad premonition in their hearts. What's wrong? Ryutaro asked nervously. Did you find the Li Qingyin? Noah raised his eyes and looked at the three people in front of him. However, there is reliable information that indicates that the protogut animal with the legacy of the 7 stars in its body has been dealt with. As for the mission targets box, someone witnessed it being taken away by a man wearing a mask and a tuxedo. Wadash. Mugino, Ryotaro, and Yenju couldn't help but stand up. Needless to say, the three of them clearly knew the consequences of the Seven Stars' legacy being taken away by the Leech Ingin. How could this be? Mugino clenched his teeth. The Leech Ingin only had one partner by his side, and he had to evade our search. On our side, almost all of the famous police companies in Tokyo were mobilized. Logically speaking, we shouldn't have been slower than the Leech Ingin. Even the news should have been received so long ago. How could this be? It's very simple. Noah stood up, the corners of his mouth curling into a cold arc. Someone blocked the news. You're saying that someone blocked the news? Ryotaro seemed to have thought of something as his face stiffened. In other words, there's someone. Mugino raised his voice. There's someone behind the Leech Ingin. Noah didn't say anything as he picked up the bag on his shoulder and walked towards the door. President, Yenju hurriedly called out. Where do you plan to go? Noah didn't give Mugino, Ryotaro, and Yenju a chance to react as he directly pushed the door open and walked out, leaving only this place. Saint Residence. Leaving Mugino, Ryotaro, and Yenju behind, Noah walked out of the area where the fairy tale was located. It was surrounded by ruins and belonged to the outer area of District 39. He walked forward at a leisurely pace. However, this scene didn't last long. When the fairy tale was almost out of sight, Noah stopped walking. A light drizzle was falling from the sky, making the already dark sky even darker. Noah stood in the rain and didn't care about his hair and clothes that were gradually getting wet from the drizzle. He took the bag from his shoulder and forcefully smashed it on the ground. Bang! Gravel flew everywhere, and the tip of the pouch containing the Magic Knight's sword also sank into the ground, standing upright. At this moment, Noah suddenly reached out his hand and pulled out a gun from his back. He pointed at the direction of one of the broken walls in the ruins and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Bang! The bullet's power was comparable to an anti-tank rifle. It was enough to pierce through heavy armored vehicles as it rubbed against the air and the rain. It drew a fiery light as it flashed through the air and hit the broken wall. Boom! With a loud sound, the broken wall was directly penetrated, creating a hole the size of a wash basin. However, before that, two shadows actually jumped from behind the wall and landed on the top of the broken wall. As expected of the guild leader of Fairy Tale, the famous shelter of the Cursed Child. Even the way they greet each other is so special. However, I personally like this method. The people standing on the top of the broken wall were Leech Ingin and Leech Benet Jr. that the entire Tokyo region was looking for. We meet again. Leech Benet Jr. held two pitch-black odachi made from Japanese. His eyes had already turned dark red and he looked eager to try. Dad, can I continue to cut him down this time? Not this time, my daughter. Leech Ingin laughed as if he was giving a speech. At least, before we finished talking, Noah directly lowered his hand that was holding the gun and coldly looked at Leech Ingin. Is this all that you want to say? Then I'll just directly state my intentions. Leech Ingin faced Noah and extended his hand. Do you want to join us? Chapter 101. Join you? Even Noah couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. You want me to destroy the Tokyo area with you? Only the Tokyo area? Leech Ingin first said this sentence with a deep meaning, then immediately let out a low laugh again. President Noah, as far as I know, a year ago, you used your private property to buy cheap land in the outer area, built a large number of houses, schools, hospitals, and even research facilities there, and took in all the cursed children, and established Fairy Tale. Noah didn't answer, but the gaze he looked at Leech Ingin with became colder and colder. But Leech Ingin didn't seem to notice Noah's gaze, and continued to speak. Fairy Tale became famous after it was first established and entered people's sight, because no one thought that there would be such a stupid person who would provide shelter for a group of children who could turn into monsters at any time. As everyone knew, once a human was infected with the protozoan virus, which was best at modifying DNA, would transform a living human into a monster in a very short time. There was only one kind of human being that was an exception. That was the cursed child. However, that didn't mean that the protozoan virus in the cursed child's body would obediently provide them with power, allowing them to become superhumans. The protozoan virus lurking in the cursed child's body was also extremely dangerous. Unlike humans who were directly infected with the protozoan virus in the cursed child, who was infected with the protozoan virus from the embryonic stage, wouldn't break out all at once. Instead, it lurked in the cursed child body, slowly modifying their bodies. This naturally allowed the cursed children to obtain self-regenerative abilities and strength that exceeded that of ordinary people. However, the cursed children were also unable to avoid being infected by the protozoa virus. The virus in their bodies was still corroding their bodies. Therefore, the cursed child would sooner or later turn into a protozoan. No one knew how long this process would take. People only knew that once the invasion rate of the protozoan virus in the cursed child's body exceeded 50%, the cursed child would turn into a protozoan and would no longer be able to maintain human form and rationality. This was also the reason why many of the cursed children were willing to become initiators and accept the management of the International Initiator Supervision Organization, IISO, as well as partner with the police. This was because the International Initiator Supervision Institute, IISO, had an agent that could slow down the invasion of the protozoan virus in the cursed child's body to a certain extent. Back then, Noah had put in a lot of effort in order to obtain the formula for the ascension preparation. Otherwise, many of the cursed children in Fairy's Tale would have turned into primitive animals long ago. Why would you want to establish Fairy Tale? I can roughly guess the reason. Leech Ingin stood on top of the wall and looked down at Noah. However, in order to make Fairy Tale operate, no matter if it was a success or a failure, President Noah, you must have encountered a lot of difficulties, right? Hearing this, Noah's hand holding the gun slightly tightened. The difficulty Leech Ingin was referring to wasn't the difficulty of establishing Fairy Tale or the setbacks he had suffered in the process. Instead, he was referring to the difficulties others had created for him. Let's not talk about the Tendo Chrysanthemum, who originally hated the cursed child, and talk about the plundered generation of the commoners in the Tokyo area. Basically all wanted the cursed child to die, so how could they be willing to let them have a good life? Therefore, when Fairy's Tale was first established, there would be so-called volunteers forming groups almost every day. They would go to the entrance of Fairy's Tale to raise flags and protest. They would curse the existence of Fairy's Tale all day long. There were even some radicals who wanted to sneak into Fairy Tale and specifically sabotage it. Noah knew that for these people who were completely blinded by hatred, it was useless to say anything more. Not to mention, Noah did not have a good impression of these pitiful people who had hateful things to begin with. Therefore, during the 1-year period after Fairy Tale was established, Noah did not know how many times he personally made a move to throw these people back to the city like garbage. For this reason, these people did not stop jumping around. Not to mention the many street protests, they also gathered together from time to time, planning to do something. Because of this, the reason why Fairy Tale became so famous. Perhaps, these people who paraded on the streets from time to time to give free publicity to Fairy Tale were also a big reason. And from then on, Noah and Fairy Tale became known as the shelter of the cursed child. Leech Ingin's words made Noah recall all the things that had happened in the past year in his mind. His grip on the spear tightened. President Noah, I have to say, it's not just me, but many people are surprised that you can still manage Fairy Tale under such circumstances. Leech Ingin seemed to be reminding him. But, have you not thought of eliminating all these people who only know how to talk and will not get along with you no matter what? Noah did not understand what Leech Ingin was hinting at. He could be considered to have lived in vain. This is the reason why you invited me to join you? This can only be considered the reason why you joined us. Leech Ingin corrected him. And the reason why we invited you is because you are very strong. Oh. Noah curled his lips, a bit of sarcasm appearing in his tone. Are you worried that I will interfere with your plans? This is also one of the reasons. Leech Ing-yin pressed down on the hat on his head and once again extended his hand towards Noah. Come with me. Let's destroy this world together. Destroy the world. This sentence was like a basin of cold water that was poured on Noah's heart. Immediately after, a thick flame of anger rose in Noah's heart. Destroy the world? Destroy the world that would be as happy as a child when it was repaired and would be extremely happy to meet him? What a joke! Noah slowly raised his head, a pair of eyes that were filled with unprecedented anger. The vast magical power in his body also boiled, turning into a strong wind that rose from Noah's body. If you say what you just said again, I will make you stay here forever. With Noah as the center, a gust of wind formed by mana spread out wildly, blowing away the surrounding ruins and causing them to collapse completely. Leech In-yin and Leech Benet Jr.'s pupils constricted at the same time. They raised their hands and blocked in front of them. Their bodies tensed up, and an extremely strong sense of danger rose in their hearts. The nephew and daughter, who could not sense magical power, could only feel a strong aura locking onto them, telling them that Noah's words were true. Leech In-yin could not hide the shock in his voice. Who exactly are you? Father. Leech Benet Jr.'s crazed and bloodthirsty appearance changed. Her face was filled with fear as she tugged at Leech In-yin's clothes. We will die. We will die. Leech In-yin's eyes flashed with uncertainty as he gritted his teeth. Let's go. Without any hesitation, Leech In-yin and Benet Jr. leaped up and disappeared from the scene. The wind gradually stopped. Noah, who was standing alone in the ruins, closed his eyes tightly and allowed the rain to splash on his body. He did not speak for a long time. Chapter 102. In the dark conference room, a deathly stillness pervaded the air. Led by Sheng Tianzi, all the top officials in the Tokyo area were gathered in the headquarters. Looking at the real-time display in front of them, they all had ashen faces. Taking a closer look, the image displayed on the large monitor was a hellish scene. In a word, it was a pile of corpses covered in blood. In the middle of the blood and corpses that had just died, a man in a tuxedo with a mask and a little girl with 2 kodachi stood there. Although there was not a single drop of blood on them, there was no doubt that they were the ones who had caused this hellish scene. In the dark conference room, many officials' faces turned ashen. They covered their mouths and looked like they wanted to vomit but didn't dare to. Sheng Tianzi's originally flawless face seemed to have become a bit paler, but he still stared at the large screen in front of him without moving his gaze for a moment. Only Chrysanthemum Prime Minister maintained his usual expressionless appearance from beginning to end. He was not affected by the bloody scene and was still calm. Just a minute ago, the high-ranking officials present had personally witnessed the scene of the police officers lying all over the ground provoking the father and daughter pair. In the end, all of them were attacked by the other party and fell one after another, dyeing the ground red with their own blood. Among these police officers, there were at least 10 teams that were ranked in the top 1,000. Under such circumstances, a total of 30 teams of police officers almost couldn't last a minute in the hands of Leech In-yin and Leech Benet and were all killed. It was easy to imagine how shocked the high-ranking officials were when they witnessed all of this with their own eyes. Sitting at the head of the table, Sheng Tianzi was not defeated by the bloody scene and the cruel reality. He adjusted his emotions and forced himself to calm down, then looked at one of the officials. What about the other police officers? Most of them have already set off to the unexplored area where the Leech father and daughter are. The official was sweating as he answered with a somewhat hoarse voice. However, even the first group of police officers to set off will need more than 2 hours to reach the area where the Leech father and daughter are. No matter what, they won't be able to make it in time. When these words came out, a touch of despair appeared on the faces of many officials. An hour ago, the news that Leech In-yin had obtained the legacy of the 7 stars, and was rushing to an unexplored area, preparing to summon the protozoa, Stage V, had reached the ears of the top authorities in Tokyo. Sheng Tianzi, who understood that the situation had begun to become irreversible, immediately called for a battle conference. All the top authorities in Tokyo area gathered here to discuss countermeasures while notifying the police companies involved in the operation to pursue the leech father and daughter. Now an hour had passed. The fate of the first group of police officers who arrived at the area was presented in front of everyone's eyes. It was only then that everyone realized that they had really underestimated this police team that was originally ranked 134th in the IP rankings. They had also underestimated the difference between 100 police officers and 1,000 police officers. If this continues, the stage V will arrive in the Tokyo area. At that time, looking at the big screen in front of him, a senior official spoke hesitantly. Speaking of which, why did Leech Ingyin mercilessly kill all the promoters, but not the initiators? The ones who died were all the promoters in the police team. As for the initiators, they were all knocked out and imprisoned by Leech Ingyin and Leech Benet Jr. With the Leech father and daughter's personality of killing without blinking, they shouldn't be merciful to children, right? Sheng Tianzi naturally also noticed this phenomenon and muttered to himself. I'm afraid he did it too. Before Sheng Tianzi could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by an indifferent voice from outside the conference room. To restrain me, right? Following this sentence, the door of the conference room was pushed open. A young man carrying a bag over his shoulder and a piece of paper in one hand walked in as if no one was around. Behind him, a few guards were rushing over, as if they wanted to stop him from entering the conference room. Looking at the young man who suddenly barged in, everyone present couldn't react. Even Sheng Tianzi was slightly startled and spoke in surprise. President Noah? It was none other than Noah. With a rare cold expression on his face, Noah didn't pay attention to the people who were staring at him in a daze. He walked straight through the room, came to the front of the conference table and looked at the screen. He knows that I value the cursed child, so he wants to use those children as hostages to prevent me from personally finding him. Leeching, and he really used all kinds of methods. Only then did everyone realize what had happened. President Noah, you can't just barge in anywhere. Chrysanthemum Tentong narrowed his eyes and said, This conference room is a place set up for national defense issues. If an ordinary person barges in, it won't end with just a few words of reprimand. Do you understand? Noah glanced at Chrysanthemum Tentong and didn't say anything. He directly placed the piece of paper in his hand in front of the people present. It was a piece of paper with a circle in the middle. The circle was filled with names and seals that were stamped on the outside of the circle. It was just like a joint signature. It was written on the outside of the circle. Everyone's eyes couldn't help but shift to this piece of paper. When they saw the contents of the paper clearly, they all gasped. This was a joint agreement. The purpose was very simple. It was to gather like-minded comrades in activities similar to peasant uprisings. In order to conceal the identity of the mastermind would be drawn in a circle, and the rest of the signatories were all accomplices. Everyone present clearly saw the title of the joint agreement, 7 Stars Inheritance Theft Plan Joint Agreement. Suddenly, everyone's gaze instinctively turned to the person next to him and subconsciously retreated. This person's name was one of the names recorded on the paper. Holy Son of Heaven, your subordinate seems to have something rather interesting. Noah said faintly. I didn't expect that the person secretly acting behind Leech Ingyin would instruct Leech Ingyin to steal the 7 Stars Inheritance and block the information about the location of the 7 Stars Inheritance. The person who caused us to be one step behind Leech Ingyin and also caused us to fall into this situation is right beside you. How ironic. But thanks to this, I've saved a lot of trouble. The high-ranking official who signed the paper turned pale and shook his head in a daze. No. The surrounding people's gazes toward him were filled with sympathy and pity. The Holy Son of Heaven glanced at Chrysanthemum Tentong, and Chrysanthemum Tentong immediately looked coldly at the high-ranking official. Take him away. No. Your Excellency Tentong. 2 guards picked up the high-ranking official who was screaming and mercilessly dragged him out of the conference room. Only then did the Holy Son of Heaven look at Noah with a hesitant expression. President Noah, you don't have to explain anything to me. Noah only looked at the big screen in front of him and didn't even turn his head. I don't want to know what tricks you people in power are playing. But Noah raised his eyes and looked at Chrysanthemum Tentong. If you want to make a move on fairy tale, then you should first consider whether you have the ability to do so. After saying this, Noah turned around and walked out of the conference room, ignoring the extremely oppressive atmosphere behind him. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.